be mostly meeting staff. It's going to be used during
And we're back to lunch right now.
the management team is going to have to construct relative questions inside of work issue by putting up yeah.
It's always
Good idea.
Good idea. Right, it's only
Yes.
it's 30 feet long.
And you go through that.
A huge issue for big people.
No, and likewise, that's what I was asking you. You know, most of it is like standard. You know, for all the terms and conditions and all that stuff. Some of the others.
With the emergency
We'll probably change it.
I'll do my normal things to support that.
So, did you see, are we off and running?
Yes.
Really? Is that true? So you can get up fast, right?
Good morning. Just waiting for Councillor Morris to join us. Okay, call the meeting to order. Casey, anything to change on the agenda?
I have two items that are on table, and they're for the council. The first one is item 3.18, and it's a letter from Mr. Mills Ranger regarding numerous items on the agenda.
Right.
And item 10.3A on table is a package from Islands Trust regarding their budget process.
Okay. Anything else? Anyone? Yes, Melanie.
I was just wondering if I could add a late item, on table item, which is a quick discussion about an agenda item for the House Sound Forum on April 29th.
No. Emergency emergent are our reasons for adding it to it. So I think the next meeting, unless there's something that we have to get, April 29th is quite a ways out.
Fair enough?
Okay. Okay. Motion to accept the agenda then? All in favor? Okay. And consent agenda. How are we doing on that one this morning? Any full things from that? Okay, we're off.
It's just a very quick one for the busting one. I forget which.
So we're pulling.
Yeah.
So this
2.4?
2.4?
Yeah.
Okay, so let's put that at, it'll go into number 11 now. 2.4 busting. Anybody got anything?
The revised contract, 2.5.
2.5 park plan revised contract, okay. Anything else?
2.3, the emergency planning report.
Okay.
It'll be brief.
And
I worry more about how long it takes to read the recommendations to actually vote on them. That's okay.
Item 11.2.2.
Okay.
Slight change to the wording of the resolution.
Okay. And Melanie?
2.13, the Fire Hall Steering Committee.
Okay.
2.113A.
2.13A. That's a nice short recommendation. Okay. Anything else? Okay, so all of these will work to be added at the very end, time-wise? Okay. So, I have a motion to accept the consent agenda. And seconded, all in favor? Carried. And so, Casey, who have we got for delegations this morning?
We actually have some public speakers.
Public speakers, sorry.
We have Brendan and Alice Hirsch.
Hi, maybe we'll get a second chair then?
She may choose to stand
Okay, fair enough.
for good reason, so she's near the exit.
Good morning.
So, good morning, everyone. My name is Brendan Hirsch. I'm here with my wife Alice today, and also our daughter Everly. And it's really a pleasure to have the opportunity to speak briefly before the mayor and council. And what we're speaking about today is an application for variance on 1780 Billington Road that you'll hear more about later on from Mr. Martin. To be here today is very exciting for us. Alice and I are hoping to build our family's first home, and we're hoping to do so here on Bowen Island. After we discovered the lot on Billington Road last August, we spent the last 6 months getting to know John and Joan Tennant, who are the owners of the land, exploring the land, and working on the proposal that we now bring forward to you today. To introduce us to you, both Alice and I are pediatricians at BC Children's Hospital in Vancouver, so our work life is quite busy, and we've come to see Bowen Island as a place of refuge for us over the past years. I think we've been captured by the wonderfully strong sense of community and character that exists out here. So, sure, we've fallen in love with this island like many other people have, and we are seeing it now as a place that would be a wonderful place for us to raise our daughter. Thinking about parenting in that way, it's also really important for us that we think about building a home that reflects our values, and those are values of environmental stewardship and values of community responsibility. We hope that from the proposal that's in front of you, you will see that we believe our values are very much in line with those of council, those of the official community plan, and of the community of Bowen Island. The specific lot we're talking about is very dramatic and beautiful, which is why we love it. It also presents hardship for anyone who may choose to build out there. The reason is that there's a very dramatic cliff on the property that limits the amount of available land outside of the 30-meter setback. Furthermore, if one was to build any sort of structure behind that 30-meter setback, it would be a structure that would be in the shadow of a cliff and essentially in darkness year-round. It would have no direct sunlight on it whatsoever. Although it's not at all central to our site's proposal, which is very site-specific, I think it's important to note that the most proximal cottages on both the east and the west are well within the 30-meter setback. So Alice and I have been very thoughtful in this process. It's taken us a long time. It's over 6 months to realize. And we've been working with our architects to try and preserve the natural beauty of the site. The home that's presented to you takes its shape specifically so that it's able to navigate and fit between all existing trees, some of which are quite beautiful. The house itself is only 22 feet wide, and that's an interesting feature because what it allows is that there will be minimal visibility from the waterfront. It creates a structure that seems much smaller than it is. It's actually a small structure, but seems even smaller from the waterfront. We've also positioned it right in the center of the lot. There's a So it's about 400 feet of waterfront, and it's right in the middle of it. And the reason why it's in the middle of it is that it's maximal distance from both the east and the west neighbors. It presents absolutely no issues with their view or with their quality of life on those lots. We were very pleased to hear that Mr. Whitehead gave an environmental review that said he found absolutely no environmental concerns with it, other than usual measures that anyone would do in constructing on Bowen Island. Where the site actually sits is removed from the water by 2 subsequent rock bluffs, which is what allows it to be a very environmentally safe structure with respects to not imposing on the shoreline in any way. And where it sits on the property is very safe in terms of not having any other environmental consequences. You know, I think the final thing I'd like to say is that I don't think it's lost on this group that a lot like this is zoned for someone to have the potential to build a very, very large home, like a 7,000 square foot home. And that's not at all what we're presenting here. And I think it's in line with the beliefs that Alice and I have in having minimal impact on the land, that we'd like to present this small and narrow structure which allows us to enjoy the outdoors, to have access to it, rather than creating a much larger structure that would sit on top of the outdoors. I hope you can tell how passionate Alice and I have become about this project by the words I've said to you. We would be very happy to answer any questions. We would look forward to hearing any comments that the councillors may have. And we'd also be happy to arrange a site visit if anybody would be interested and find that that would help them to consider this proposal. So thanks for your time today.
Hey, thank you. Thank you. Any questions anyone have before? Okay. Well, thanks very much.
Thank you.
So, moving along to delegations now. Is any more speakers?
No more speakers.
Okay. So, we have Chris Staples from Rethink Canada with us this morning. Good morning, sir.
Hello.
Thank you for joining us.
Oh, it's wonderful to be here.
Good, man. I've heard all about you.
Well, you're about to hear more, so.
Excellent.
Yeah, it's, when we bought a place here 2 years ago, I never thought I'd be sitting here at council 2 years later, and I'm thrilled and honored actually to be part of this community brand initiative. Yeah, my name is Chris Staples, and 2 years ago we bought this place, which is on Mount Gardner Road, and we live here about a third of the time, about 100 nights last year, and plan to retire here in 3 or 4 years. We bought this place. You might know these folks from Don and Diane Marshall, and it's been amazing. We've really become friends with the Marshalls, and they've introduced us to the whole community and really helped instill in us a sense of what makes Bowen special. And obviously they have big shoes to fill as members of the community. Like when we found out that they were, community members of the year, it really set the bar high. But, when we got asked to be involved at Rethink and do this on a pro bono basis, I jumped at the opportunity because I see how important this community is. So let me tell you a little bit about Rethink, and more importantly, who are these guys and what do they want to do to our island? You don't need to worry about this at all. We may do advertising, but we're not a typical advertising agency, and that's why we're called Rethink. So I'm going to tell you a little bit about how we approach this world of branding and how we specifically want to approach this project with you guys on Bowen Island. So let me tell you a little bit of history. I come from Edmonton originally and moved to Vancouver in 1990. And in the 90s, I worked at an advertising agency called Palmer Jarvis, one of the big ones in town. And my mentor there was Mr. Ron Woodall, who's sitting back here. So if I say anything rude, it's because of his influence. So in 1999, there were 3 of us at Palmer Jarvis who decided to branch out and do our own thing. So we created a company called Rethink with just 3 of us in 1999. 16 years later, we have 3 offices. We have 70 people in Vancouver, 60 people in Toronto, and 10 people in Montreal. So it's gone very well, and we've got lots of accolades and things like that. Worked on a lot of cool projects. I want to just introduce you to a little bit of what we do. We do everything for companies from logo design and even uniforms. When you see the Shaw truck in and around Bowen, we designed that truck and the logo on that. But we do all the advertising and oftentimes staff orientation stuff, websites, anything you can think of to do with communications for all sorts of different kinds of clients. But when we started Rethink, one of our goals was I realized life is short and I didn't want to work on things unless I really believed in them myself. So we really see our role as to either create new believers in something, either a company or an island or a service, or to really rally those believers under a common sort of rallying cry. But for us to do that, we have to believe in things first. So that's why we don't have any toilet paper brands at Rethink. We don't do anything for lotteries or casinos or things that we don't believe in. Life is short, and I want to work on things that I either have a personal connection to, or we do at Rethink, or organizations that are doing some kind of good. So I'm going to give you a few examples. I grew up in a little tiny town outside of Edmonton, actually, and my very first restaurant meal was an A&W hamburger that my dad drove 40 kilometers away to bring in a bag. And so A&W is one of our clients now, and I really believe in what they're doing. My first beer was Molson Canadian. Shaw finally brought cable to my little town, Devon, in 1980. Oh, my God, we were so remote, and it just blew my head off, basically, and got me interested in advertising, so it's awesome to work on Shaw. So those are things that I've had personal connections with, and then there's other companies that we work with that just do good. One of them is Coast Capital Savings, one of the largest credit unions in Canada, 500,000 members, and last year they gave $7 million back to the community. So really good folks there. And I've worked on Science World for years and years and years, and just love their mission, which is trying to get kids, especially girls, interested in science, because there's a huge need. This is a billboard we created with an interesting science fact. 2 ounces of gold can cover an entire billboard, and we've got a lot of press. You had a security guard there in case somebody tried to scrape off the gold. So let's talk a little bit about you guys and what is your belief system summed up in words and pictures. That's really, I think, what the goal of this whole project is. And you guys have seen a lot of presentations from the EDC and the branding group on this, so I'm not going to go into all of that, but I do want to talk about, now that we've been engaged to help with this process, what can you guys expect? Well, it's not going to be like this. It's not like Mad Men, or if you're a little older like me, like Bewitched. It's not, there's going to be never a time when I'm standing up here like with these flip charts and doing a dog and pony show and trying to sell you anything at all. That's not what we think we're in the business to do, for one thing. The first step in any project that we embark on is listening and learning. And we've been doing a lot of that. And you guys have too. In fact, I have to tell you, we work for big clients. None of them, in my experience, have gone to the lengths you have to listen and learn. It's very, very admirable in what Edward and Sherry have done with the surveys, with both visitors, with residents, and now with businesses. There's such a wealth of interesting stuff there. And what's so fascinating for me personally is even just looking at it roughly, you see a lot of similarities and overlaps. And that makes our job so much easier because there are shared beliefs. And I think that we are going to have an easier time because of that. If there weren't shared beliefs, it would make things much, much harder. So, listening and learning is really, really important. Reviewing all that research, really getting into it. And then really what we try to do is set a strategy based on some of that research with a team that we have at Rethink. So this is this is actually a meeting that we had with the EDC and at Marshall House here, and had lots of good discussion about how we're going to move forward and all of the different things we really needed to watch for to make this a super collaborative process and not like Bewitched or Mad Men. Then we appointed a team at Rethink, and these ladies are going to be working on this project. Lisa is a creative director. She's a designer. She does like logos and website design. Rachel's our project manager, and Morgan's a writer. Now, these ladies had all been to Bowen at various times in their life, but I had them actually come out, each of them, and spend a weekend at Bowen, and I created a little, it was like almost like a scavenger hunt, basically. I want you to go and buy some sausages from the butcher shop, and then I want you to go, to this beach over here and take a picture of that, and then I want you to go and have a drink at the pub, and then I want you to go and see Bridal Falls, and I want you to go and read the sign at the orchard to learn a bit about the Union Steamship era, and I want you to go and talk to somebody at the library and see how cool that is. So there were a whole bunch of things that they all did, and they just all fell in love with the island, and I think really got a good sense of all sides of it, from nature to the businesses to the cultural side of Bowen as well. So they're sort of ready to go. Once we absorb all this learning, and we're still in that process of absorbing, to be honest, because we have to look at the business survey in a lot of detail, we're going to jointly, with the EDC, create a roadmap. We call this basically a strategy document. It's really simple. It's basically where are we, where do we want to go, and how do we want to get there. Pretty simple. So, what makes Rethink a little bit different, though, and I think this is going to be good for Bowen, is that a lot of agencies will come in and say, it's almost like you're looking for treasure. X marks the spot. It's exactly there. It's not 6 inches there. It's not 6 inches there. It must be there. You must dig there. And then they dig there, and they dig really deep, and they stand up, and they try to sell that to you, this one way of going. We don't actually believe always that the treasure is exactly there. It might be 6 inches there. It might be a foot there. It might be 2 feet there. So rather than, what we like to do is, rather than saying X marks the spot, we create almost like a little strategic sandbox. And within that sandbox, we dig little shallow holes. We say, the treasure might be here, or it might be there, or it might be here. Let's just dig down a little bit and see what we get. And so we call those shallow holes, and all those X's can be added by anybody who has got a good idea. I'll take a good idea from anyone. We'll get most of them from the research, but there's always different ways to look at branding and articulating a belief system. So that's really what the creative process is going to be like, where we identify some X's and we dig some shallow holes, and then we start work on bringing that to life. Now, a brand has words and pictures, and all of these different combinations of things can give you different feelings about things. And so to help articulate that, before we even do anything, we're going to show you how things feel. So it could be colorful or energetic, sophisticated, refined, bold or typographic. These aren't for Bowen, these are for other clients that we used. So these will be specific to this project, and there'll be 3 or 4 of them. And then what we do is we sort of look at other examples of what other people are doing and things. And then we do a lot of scribbles and things. When we create shallow holes, I always say if something looks great on a napkin, it's going to be awesome in the final execution. And everybody should be able to get this, And it should be very, very simple. So we do a lot of little sketches in all these different shallow holes. And we apply a really rigorous process to it. We have this rule called the 1 or 100 rule. It's pretty simple. Our best strategy or idea will be our first idea or our 100th. But we won't know until we do 100. So we're going to go wide on this. We're going to look under every rock on Bowen here for ideas, and we're going to really, really do an exhaustive search on this whole thing. And then what we do is we narrow things down. We narrow things down through a process we call peer review. And basically all that means is if we take people and we show them one at a time some of these scribbles on napkins, and we want to show different kinds of people that represent different people in the community, and listen to them and see if they understand it, and if they like it, and if they've seen anything like it before. And if we get people shaking their heads, we pull it out, we take it out of the sandbox. But some things people gravitate to, and we dig deeper on those areas. So that's sort of what the process is going to be like. We're working through right now with the EDC exactly what this sort of narrowing peer review process is going to be. But it works a charm, and it's great. And the criteria that we're looking for here is a pretty simple. We like to keep stuff in English, and pretty simple here at Rethink. This is how we evaluate ideas. They have to tick off all these boxes. We call it crafts. So they have to be clear, understandable, relevant to all the different groups on Bowen, achievable. We don't have lots and lots of money to spend on this project. Fresh, it should be original, it should be true to Bowen and the people here. in the community here. And shareable, this is one we added after Facebook came around. And this should be something that people feel proud of and want to put on bumper stickers and wear on T-shirts and spread the word. So that's basically that's sort of what the process is. And out of that, at the end of all of that, you're going to end up with something pretty simple. You're going to end up with a really cool articulated community brand in words and pictures. That'll be summed up in a really simple little guide, maybe 3 or 4 pages. I'm not a big fan of binders and things that nobody looks at and just go on the shelf and then nobody follows it. It should be dead simple, and it should be so simple that lots of people know how to use the tools so they can apply the look and feel without a lot of help from us. And it's sort of like a do-it-yourself kind of mentality. I think that would go over well on Bowen. So we'll then be applying this look and feel beyond the standards manual to things like the municipal website and tourism website. It'll be a very gradual process. As things need to be changed, you can change them. There's no big, D-Day kind of scenario where we flip a switch and everything changes. It's a process. It takes time. And then we're going to help create ways for Bowen Islanders to spread the brand and hope, through this process, we want people to be proud of this and want to wear a T-shirt that sums up the brand. And we'll phase in the new look over time. So that's basically sort of the process. And, generally, you guys talked about timing last meeting. Usually it takes anywhere from 3 months to a year for us to do this for most big clients. And you guys, I think we're aiming for summer, is that right, Murray? Yeah, so that's good timing for us. And that's my spiel. So I don't know if you guys have any questions or comments or anything. I'd be happy to answer them.
Do we have Gary?
Just nothing in particular. I love the business model. It's fantastic. It's very entertaining. It's light and it's the way Bowen should go. And I also just want to say thank you very much for getting involved with this, Chris. It's just absolutely amazing that you did, and we sure appreciate that.
Yeah.
Thank you. That was a great presentation, and I'm happy that you're involved in this. I'm wondering, under number 1 there, listen and learn.
Yeah.
You referred to Ed and Sherry's research in terms of community input, and I just wondered about, we've got all these other Bowen surveys and and the official community plan.
Oh, all that, yeah. How many pages? 170 pages? Gordon and I were actually talking about how when we're in the listen and learn phase, we want to see it all. We want to see it all. So it's not just the surveys. The surveys are great because they're topical and they pinpoint specifically on stories, people, feelings. But there's a lot of other stuff as well, and Gordon was listing off about 7 things, and some of them were just the ones that you just mentioned. So,
great.
Yeah.
Any other comments? So thank you so much. And we have world-class everything on this island, right? But we have committees where we have people with PhDs and we say, sorry, your skill set isn't quite right. But I think you've raised the bar for us a little bit between you and Ed and Sherry. This is really getting up there.
Wow.
It's quite wonderful. How many communities could expect this sort of thing pro bono? It's just fabulous. Thank you so much.
It's going to be exciting. Can't wait to come back and show you all. Yeah.
All right. Well,
Thank you.
We're excited. Okay. So, business arriving. We have Eva, sailing facility, yacht club. Can you clear a room or why?
You guys feel free to move up.
That's right, we don't need to hide the corner anymore. Nowhere to hide.
Yes, Daniel. Okay.
I just want to say that while Emma's not here, to give us a chance just to say that Wendy and I are here to represent the Bowen Island Yacht Club. And We weren't able to get here for public comments, so we're hoping that if there are questions or whatever, we can answer those.
All we have to do is we have to switch over to committee of the whole meeting and then switch back into council meeting. So let's see how it goes with Emma before we start looking at that stuff.
Yeah, thank you, Barry.
Oh, Emma was here. All that other stuff went too quickly.
Sorry.
Yeah, let's do that. Yeah, if we can have a resolution to move to committee of the whole, and all in favor? Okay, so the council meeting is suspended. Come and tell us what you got.
Well, the first is that we're very, very pleased that this agreement in principle has been developed, and we've been attending Parks and Trails Committee meetings for several months and Recreation Committee meetings and trying to answer questions and look at the issues that each of the committees thinks are important to address in the agreement, and that's what resulted in this agreement. But as I reviewed this agreement late last week, with our committee, what we found is that we think there are some inconsistencies in terms of what was discussed at the December 14th Parks and Trails Committee meeting, and then when we reviewed the minutes from the Parks and Trails Committee meeting, they didn't actually reflect our understanding of what was discussed at that meeting. And so I actually think that we have a little bit of homework to do as a result of this agreement before we, as the Yacht Club, can say yes and sign on the dotted line. And I had some email correspondence with Emma about that, so she's aware of it. And here's Emma, so she knows what I'm talking about. But and it's really a minor detail relative to the whole thing, but I think we just have to understand. If you folks are ready to say, great, go ahead, we're ready to agree to this, and then we have this sticking point where we can't actually agree with it. We just need to iron those things out before we can say, yes, agreement, and I don't want to belabor this and make this process take longer than it needs to take, but it also has to be okay for all parties. So the sticking point is around the existing permitted boat rack, which we currently occupy above the beach, and where the permanent location for that boat rack would be. So that is kind of a minor part of the entire piece, which is really about the facility in the existing parking lot. So that's why I say it's not the concept we of course agree to, and we support everything that's in the agreement, but it's about how we deal with this our permit, which goes through May of 2016, and then it's meant to expire. And what Parks and Trails would like us to do is let it expire and us to come up with a new location for that boat rack as part of the foreshore assessment process, which is great. But that's actually not what's written in the agreement, and that's paragraph 9D. So I just think we need to work that out and get that straight. So that if everything, if that piece was removed, or, then we could just deal with the agreement on its own, or if you sent us a way to work that out and come back to you, whatever the right process is, I'm willing to do whatever the right process is, but I just think that we need to sort that out as part of the overall concept.
Can I just ask you first? Yeah. Okay, so the rack that's sitting there is your rack.
That's correct.
Right.
Well, there's more than one rack there, but there's one sailboat rack.
In this document, in this
one referenced here is...
The one reference here is yours, and your intent is to replace that with the storage facility that you're building, right? Or are you going to have two things?
Well, it's not clear yet because it depends on the foreshore assessment. So our goal is to have a rack as close to the beach as possible, because moving those boats on a daily basis from the parking lot down to the beach is really challenging.
Okay, so you want a storage facility for the long term and a rack for overnight or whatever.
That's
okay,
right.
So at the end of the day, there would be two locations that you would have boats.
That's
and the question becomes, what is the most appropriate location for that rack?
That's correct.
And at this point, what you would like is for it to not expire in May, or to be replaced by a commitment for another spot, or what?
To not expire until we have a commitment for a final location.
Okay.
So that, because right now the permit expires, so that means as of May we can't store any boats near the beach. And I don't know if by May we'll have that agreement on what a permanent location will be. So we just want an interim solution until we have that agreement for.
Okay, so sorry to preempt your whole report, Emma. I appreciate that you're going to make a report on this in a second, but I'd like to clear up this one little point if I could. From your review of this, do you see a possibility of extending the lease on that area until another rack location is found, or do we need to leave this clause in this agreement?
I don't have a problem with the agreement as it is right now. I think it is fine. I think if the boat rack is to stay there past its expiry date, then it should be subject to a foreshore assessment, whether that's undertaken by the municipality or by Bowen Island Yacht Club. I have no opinion on that, but I do recommend that a foreshore assessment be done in order for that boat rack to stay in that location.
Okay, gotcha. I think. Okay, Kathy.
I just wanted to clarify that, and what I understand is both staff and the Parks and Trails Committee have concerns with the boat ramp remaining on the beach. Just for a little clarification.
Boat rack. Yeah. Okay, so Florrie, that's the only issue that you have at this point?
Mm-hmm. And Parks and Trails is actually committed to doing that, trying to do that assessment in a timely manner so that we can resolve this.
Right. Okay, so before we flip back to being a real council meeting, I just know that you wanted to comment on this. I'm sorry. Yes.
And Gary.
Alice and Gary and then Melanie. Sorry.
This whole boat rack issue I found very confusing in the agreement, because it doesn't say that it clearly said you were going to remove the existing one, but it didn't say that you were going to be using the new one. The study was going on about it. And so I have a number of concerns with the writing of the agreement. And the other major concern I have is, in the staff report, it talks about the outdoor portion of the facility being free for public use outside of Bowen Island Yacht Club's hours, but that isn't what's stated in the agreement. In principle, it says the premises shall be used by the public, and the premises are more than just the outdoor portion. So there's a problem, I think, with the agreement there. And then I've got some other sort of picky things on typos and stuff like that. I'm not sure what the right process should be at this point. I think maybe we need to resolve some of these issues. Because one of my questions was, is the yacht club happy, and if we agree, are they willing to sign on this? And in which case, I guess I was going to say, fine, if you like those clauses, okay. You're obviously not, so I think we should maybe take comments and continue as committee the whole, and then defer to the next council meeting for decision.
Mm-hmm. Okay, Gary?
Along those same lines, I just took some notes, I was very confused about how that was going to shake down, because the one part of the contract says that when the termination of the lease, the boat racks will be gone, and then in a couple other places it says that, the Parks and Trails will assess the viability and valuation of the boat rack. And I'm going, well, told them to take it out, and now you're reassessing, doing an evaluation of a boat rack. Mm-hmm. So I don't know which one takes precedent, whether there's going to be a boat rack, is it your boat rack, somebody else's boat rack. I was just confused about the issue, the way it was written.
Okay.
And maybe there'll be some.
If after the foreshore assessment, there's not a close enough location for a boat rack, does that put the whole project in jeopardy if there's not a space close enough to the beach?
Well, there's two options that have been identified for the foreshore assessment. One is to provide a location for a boat rack at or near the beach, and summer boat rack, and the other one is to redo the access to the beach in some way so that it's not as steep as it currently is. And so either of those two options would address our concern about moving boats from the parking lot to the beach. So we don't actually know the answer. And yes, it could put the project in jeopardy if we don't have a viable way to get boats launched at the beach. Like, we can't be the carrying of boats by children, even supervised by coaches, is just not safe on steep slopes, and it's not a good idea. So that's why we've always had a boat rack on the beach or slightly above the beach for 20 plus years. So, our hope is that we're able to reach some agreement about where to locate that boat rack, and or amend the access to the beach in order to allow for an easier way to bring the boats to the beach as part of that assessment.
Emma, before I get to you, because you're the main player in this whole thing in just a minute, I'm just going to ask Bonnie. She'd love to say something about this.
I just want to say that we don't know where there is a viable location. There is a viable location for the boat rack until the shore assessment would be undertaken, which has not the recommendation. I'm going back to the committee to get a clearer vision of what that recommendation looks like. But as of today, we don't know if there will be a viable location in the foreshore area for the boat rack without the assessment.
Gotcha. Okay.
Can you just ask?
Okay.
What does the assessment? What are you assessing? What was the components of a shoreline assessment?
So first and foremost, there is some erosion going on there. So it really is the primary focus is to look at if remediation is needed to stabilize the slope. And that was really that is one issue. And then because of the Bowen Island Yacht Club undertaking or wishing to undertake project, the two kind of got connected. But first and foremost, there appears to be destabilization going on that slope. Now this is where a professional needs to do an assessment to determine if that indeed is the case. I am not qualified to say that, it just appears.
Okay, but it's to deal with the erosion of the bank.
Yes, there appears to be erosion.
Is the primary?
Erosion.
So are there any regulations, like environmental regulations, that are coming into effect that might?
Well, erosion in itself, there's no regulations around that, but just if we want to keep the slope stable with still feeding the beach, because the nutrients from the slope actually feed the beach.
Because I'm just aware there's also a stream there.
There's a stream, so any works have to adhere to a lot of environmental regulation, but the erosion itself
But that's your primary concern.
That's the primary concern.
Yeah, thank you.
Okay, we're going to quickly go to Maureen and then I'm going to try to wrap this up.
My recollection of the Parks and Trails Committee meeting, correct me if I'm wrong, is that we had spoken about the potential extension of that temporary license to accommodate your needs over the summertime. And that's not reflected in the report or in the agreement.
That's correct.
And it's Sue Ellen's recollection as well. And that was just to enable the yacht club to continue to work while the foreshore assessment is being completed and a determination is being made. So if your only concern with the agreement in principle is that statement, which one was it again? 9D. From your perspective, Lori and Wendy, what would be required as an amendment to 9D to satisfy your concerns?
It would be to extend the license, as you suggest, so that we can function for 2016 while the foreshore assessment is being made, and then we can determine what the next step is.
Okay, we'll go to you.
So, as the brand new chair of the Parks, Trails and Greenways Association, I wasn't chairing during the earlier discussion, but I was certainly there, and I remember discussion happening. I don't remember any particular resolution about extending the or creating temporary permit and an interim permit. Not that it's a bad idea, I just think that resolution didn't come forward, and I think it would be a good idea to discuss it further at Parks, Trails and Greenway, if that's what council would want.
Okay. Okay, thank you for it. I think I'd like to give Emma an opportunity to, I'd like to go back into council meeting, give Emma an opportunity to present a report if she would like, and then we'll get to bring this for a future meeting. Okay, Alison? Okay.
Can I ask one question? Can we open the door? Is it, because it makes it feel like a closed meeting. I think people might bounce off the closed door and there's no noise.
Yes. Okay,
Thank you.
Thanks, Mark. Thanks, Mark. So, that's it for committee meeting. We're back to council meeting. Good morning, Emma. We'd like to hear your report on this.
I apologize for being late.
We were running ahead.
Now you're right on time.
And should I just run through the report or answer any of the questions that came up?
I think you should give your report
first. Okay. I guess we covered a lot of it already. This is an update to the Bowen Island Yacht Club facility proposal. And just to orient everyone, we are talking about Tunstall Bay on the west side of the island. The current location right now is in the Tunstall Bay Community Association Boathouse, and the proposed site is the current municipal parking lot for Tunstall Bay. This agreement in principle is brought forward in response to the council resolution from October of last year when this proposal was brought to council. Going through these. The agreement in principle was also referred to the Parks, Trails and Greenways Advisory Committee as well as the Recreation and Community Services Commission. It includes key terms on where the facility will be, again that's the municipal parking lot, who is undertaking the financial responsibilities of the feasibility studies, design and construction of the facility, as well as a replacement parking lot. It also talks about how the facility will be used by the community as a joint use facility, and also to ensure the appropriate environmental measures are taken, particularly to protect the fish spawning habitat nearby and any sort of slope stabilization issues. Through discussions with Bowen Island Yacht Club while we were drafting this agreement, several additional terms came up. As we just discussed, the boat rack on the foreshore, the ground that it's on right now is actually eroding at an accelerated rate over the recent years. So that has definitely been a concern that has come up for staff, so much so that the Parks Committee is looking at a stabilization project for this area. And as part of the agreement, I thought we had come to an agreement that the boat rack would be removed until assessment was done on the area. And in return, the Yacht Club wanted us to include in the agreement that when we do an assessment or undertake any stabilization project, that the use for a boat rack in that area will be included in that project. Just want to emphasize right now that those are two separate issues. The removal of the boat rack at the expiry of the license, and then when and if the municipality undertakes any stabilization project, that boat rack use will be included in that project. The agreement was sent out for legal review, make sure that all the terms did what they were meant to do, and that neither parties were legally bound by these terms, and that any future development by Bowen Island Yacht Club would still be subject to all the applicable requirements like any other development would. The agreement was referred to the Parks Committee as well as the Recreation Commission. They both recommended approval of this agreement. The Parks Committee wanted to emphasize that the beach is a public space that should accommodate all users, and as such, any improvement projects should consider all uses. And that, I feel, is reflected in the agreement, in including Bowen Island Yacht Club in any future stabilization project, as well as any other improvement projects that involve their site. The Recreation Commission wanted to make sure that as the Bowen Island Yacht Club progressed with their project and more of the community use details were finalized, that those be brought back to the Commission for further discussion. those are the gist of the comments. The Bowen Island Yacht Club timeline right now is really still at the beginning in their concept phase. They do need this agreement in principle in order to provide them and their prospective donors with some degree of assurance to enable fundraising for them to pursue the next steps in their project. So it's staff's recommendation that you approve this agreement in principle for Bowen Island Yacht Club. I think we have quite a number of questions that I would be happy to try and answer at this point.
Okay, thank you. So I think my question for council is this. I'll tell you the approach that I'm thinking of here. We can give certainty to the yacht club if we simply approve the agreement as it is. It doesn't give them what they want as far as reassurance on the boat rack on the beach. The boat rack on the beach, I think, is going to be a practical consideration of is it causing erosion, is it causing a problem, what's the time frame for dealing with it, and so on. The agreement could be amended at a future date to incorporate their concerns, but if we approve the thing now, it moves forward with some assurance on every other aspect of the agreement. The option is to send this back to committee and back to planning and ask members of council if they have typos or those sorts of things, clarifications, that it could come back to us at a future meeting with more clarity on the agreement. But then I assume that we're going to have to go back to legal and so on. So I don't know that I want to turn this into a bigger deal than it needs to be. My inclination is to approve it the way it is, unless somebody has problems with conditions in it, and then see if it can be amended later to get everybody happy. I'll start with Maureen, and then I'll go to Gary.
The agreement in principle states upon the expiry of the temporary license, and we're understanding that at the moment as the expiry of the temporary license in, I believe it's May 2016.
Yes.
The fact that there is not a date here for the expiry of the temporary license, I think gives us some room to approve this in principle and to revisit in Parks, Trails and Greenways at a later time just exactly what the expiry date for that temporary license would be. So we've got some leeway there. And the yacht club is reading this from the framework of we've got a temporary license and it's going to expire in May, but that's not actually what the agreement says.
Okay. Gary?
One thing I didn't know about was the Tunstall Bay Foreshore Stabilization Project. Is anybody shed light on that?
I deferred that. Okay. I believe that was coming forward to this meeting, and I looked at it, and I didn't want these two items to be in any way confused with each other. So that's we've got to find funding source, we've got to do budget, we've got to, that's a whole project, right? And it was sort of lumped in with this of let's use goodwill money to pay for this, and can council approve that? And my position on it was no. It's not the way we do it. We figure out what we want to do, and then we figure out how we're going to pay for it. We don't throw money at something and then figure out what we're going to do later. So that is why it's referenced, but it's not on your agenda.
Okay.
Okay.
That's fine. I don't have a problem with all parts of the agreement. I think it's a great agreement. But we do have this little stumbling block on the boat, the boat racks, and just if we can find a way to get beyond that for the time being.
Yeah, I think Maureen's solution makes sense to me. I'm going to go to Melanie and then Allison.
I just have one simple question. What is causing the erosion? Is it human use, the accessing the boats, the boat rack, or is it to do with like sea rise? Like what's the...
I'm the wrong person to answer that question.
There's been some change to the natural shoreline there, and that was to partially create a level area for the rack. So with that, without a coastal engineer behind or somebody, a professional, somebody who specializes in erosion and sediment control, the engineering there was perhaps not designed with the feeder bluff concept and stabilization. So what happened after that job took place, there was some hardening of the shoreline, and accelerated erosion has been seen ever since the hardening was done. It was all done in good faith and goodwill, and some of it was a protective mechanism for, supposedly for the channel, the fish spawning channel. But it really, shoreline engineering is a science, and it's an art. So it really just, it demands a really qualified person to design it. So there was just no ill will of anybody doing it, but there was, after that, there was still sort of brought down to higher levels. The slope was manually changed.
Okay, so from the current observations, it was from the installation of the current...
Since the installation.
And when was the installation of the...
And I'm not an expert, but this is just observation.
But when was the current...
It was approximately, it was close to between 18 months and 2 years ago.
So, but I think we're getting into a little bit of detail now that maybe should be taken up for the final details of this. Allison, what was your point?
Well, a couple of points. The first one is the Bowen Island Yacht Club is not the sole user of boat racks down there. There's other boats, and there's lots of boats up on the logs and whatever that people are dragging on. So it's not, the erosion is not, could be caused by other users besides the Bowen Island Yacht Club. That was number one. Number two, Maureen's right that the expiry of the temporary license is not a defined term in the, there's no May 16th in the agreement, but the first sentence of that clause, the Bowen Island Yacht Club agrees that the project shall be the sole storage location for Bowen Island Yacht Club equipment. So that, having the use of the word sole in there, does not, to me, and the project being the new premises on the parking lot area, that doesn't imply that there will be another boat rack. And the wording in the thing doesn't say boat rack for Bowen Island Yacht Club, because we did have the public come and ask to have a boat rack for their kayaks and whatever as well. So what boat rack are we talking about? I'm just wondering, and if I were the Bowen Island Yacht Club, without a resolution of council to direct that the temporary license not expire until May 2017, I wouldn't feel the least bit comforted by this agreement and being able to go out and raise money. And the Yacht Club does a valuable service to the community and the youth in this community with the sailing programs, and I would hate for us to put any impediments in the way of it carrying on this summer. So I don't think there's any harm in waiting until the first meeting in February, tidying up some of these details.
I'll go to Sue Ellen.
Just a quick note that I don't think there's any intention of stopping the Yacht Club from doing anything. What we've discovered, Parks and Trails Committee, through the process of looking at the proposal down there and making our comments and doing a walkabout and taking photos and all that, is that there are erosion issues, including right around the base of the Bowen Island Yacht Club's boat rack. I'm not sure how much erosion is caused by boats being stored. I think one of the issues that we've identified is the crowding. As Allison said, other people also want to store their boats down there, and there's members of the public, all kinds of different users, everything from businesses with boat racks to public people who just want to swim on the beach or maybe have a picnic.
Okay.
It's limited area, and there's a bunch of issues.
So one thing that I'm having trouble with here is, my understanding is that it's the fundraising to build the storage shelter, the building, that really the boat rack has become a secondary issue that is now seem to be driving the primary issue. And I'd like to see the thing divorced. I mean, whether or not the boat rack is in the right place, it's the right rack, it should be allowed to remain there. That's a different issue. That's the beach. The doing fundraising to build your building up in the parking lot, I see as a totally different animal, and I believe that marrying the two together is what's creating the issue.
I meant, if I could just finish, I meant to say, I like the solution looking at 9B. I didn't have a problem with that either when I looked at it, and I think, you know, what Maureen has pointed out is fine, and I'd be in support of that, in terms of
Okay.
proposal.
And Emma?
I just want to bring up again that this is an agreement in principle, so
Right.
we're not legally bound by these terms. If there are certain wording issues, I think that's not necessary for revision. I think it's more so if, you know, the actual term is disagreeable.
So, Alison, would you be?
Can I ask a follow-up question?
Sure.
No, I'm not totally copacetic yet. Yeah, agreement in principle generally means these are the terms that are going to end up in the final agreement. So by you saying this is not legally binding, does that mean you are not going to ask or request that the boat rack be moved on the 17th of May? That there will be an automatic extension to the permit?
I think right now the understanding is that we would like it removed, but I agree with the mayor that this is a term that can be discussed after this agreement.
We'll bring this back as a separate issue to a future council meeting.
Well, that was my other suggestion, is the idea the mayor had about divorcing the two. Maybe what we should do is take the references to the boat rack out of this agreement and just have the agreement about the building and premises, which is what I thought we were.
Which means that the agreement in principle can't be adopted today if we do that.
Yeah, I agree. But Flora also said she didn't think the yacht club could sign it the way it's written, so what's the point of adopting something we know they're not going to be able to sign?
Well, of course, we give
She
them
hasn't had
certainty.
time to go back to her.
We give them certainty for going forward. They know what our conditions are at that point, whether they can agree to them or not. But I mean, this is fine with me. If my understanding is that RAP agreement expires on that date, whether it's in here or not in here, whether it has anything to do with it. I see it as an extraneous issue that's gotten thrown in to be involving the whole thing with shore erosion, and I want to back that discussion out of it, and the RAP, I think, backs out automatically with it. But if it is to remain linked, then I would suggest that we defer this to a future meeting, and that councillors send their comments to Emma, and that the committee people look at it again. The yacht club make a proposal possibly to the committee, however you guys want to do it. I'm a little distressed that we're going to send this back out to legal again for this sort of agreement.
I don't think we need to send it.
Okay.
There's not many substantive changes to it. It's just clarification for it.
Okay, so can we get a motion to defer? Gary, Allison, seconded. All in favor? Okay. So you want to deal with it now? Okay.
I can find the number.
Okay. So do I have a recommendation then to pass it as presented? The recommendation
Yeah,
that
can you tell
council
me
approves
which,
the draft
it
agreement.
used to be the number, I've got my number in this stuff.
This is 5.1.
Thank you. Looking back and forth. Yeah.
Okay.
I'd like to move that council approve the draft agreement in principle for a Bowen Island Yacht Club sailing facility in Pennsylvania.
Okay, do I have a second? Okay. All in favor? No. Sure. Done. So we have
You didn't ask for a code.
those opposed. Yes, we have someone opposed.
And I'm not opposed because of the project going forward. I just think there's too many issues in this agreement.
How can we ensure that the permit expiry should get stuck with?
I would suggest another resolution that the issue of the boat rack, the Bowen Island Yacht Club boat rack, be referred to our next council meeting. A report be prepared by staff and be referred to the next council meeting.
Will it also go to Parks, Trails, and Greenways, or just here?
I think that, yeah, to council, probably a good idea.
And the rec commission?
The issue of the yacht club boat rack be referred to Parks and Trails Committee and Recreation Committee, and that staff bring back a report subsequent to these meetings.
May I suggest an amendment? That the temporary license for the boat rack be referred to, because that's the extension of the temporary license.
Yes. So, did you want to, maybe we should get the motion on the table, or unless you wanted to make some kind of a friendly amendment to your challenge.
I'd like to make a primary amendment. I'd like to, I would like to suggest that we remove the Recreation Committee just to keep this a little bit more swifter, as this isn't it. It is mostly to do with environmental issues, so I'm happy to keep this, as streamlined as possible. If it had anything to do with service provision, then I think Recreation Committee, but as it's primarily an environmental implication, I think just referring it to one committee is.
Yeah, makes sense to me.
I'm the one that wanted the Recreation Commission added because I think it has a big issue to do with service delivery and how they're going to.
But the primary issue at the moment is to deal with erosion and the effects of erosion. So I think getting their input on that one that's my comment on that.
The timing isn't going to work. Parks, Trails and Greenways doesn't meet again until the 17th of February, so the earliest would be the 22nd.
And my second resolution, Casey, said to a subsequent meeting.
Oh, sorry.
Once the committee has dealt with it.
Isn't the issue the extension of the temporary license for the Bowen Island Yacht Club boat rack that we're wanting to deal with, rather than it being? That the issue of the extension of the temporary license for the Bowen Island Yacht Club boat rack be referred to?
She's just crafting it.
Yeah.
I'm sorry. Do you want that in the beginning?
Yes, that's what I thought.
Okay, so I don't need that at the end.
No.
You're saying now. Okay, I'm sorry. Sorry, I'll make that bigger for you.
So the wording is that the issue of the temporary
Extension of the temporary
Extension.
Of the temporary license.
It's a permit, isn't it?
Or permit.
It's referred to as a license.
Oh, is it?
License of occupation.
Just go
For the use.
Okay. So,
And you can take the off that.
Refer to the Greenways and Recreation Commission. Do you still want that in? Did you agree to that?
so we can do this one of two ways. We can leave the Recreation Commission in if the person making the resolution wants that, and then we can have a proposal to amend the resolution and vote on that, and then, all that sort of
If I could just a little clarification. Recreation Commission has already approved the license, so I'm not.
Okay, all right, that's fine. That clarifies that.
Okay,
Take
so
that
we
out.
can take that out, and then I'd be prepared to do that.
Okay.
I'll make that motion.
Motion. Do I have a seconder? More discussion? Any more discussion on the motion? All in favor? Okay, it's passed unanimously. Thank you, Emma.
And I do realize, hope everybody realizes this is time sensitive.
Yeah, that's why we wanted to
Well,
pass it today.
the first resolution was back in October, and this is like.
Yeah, that's why we wanted to.
Okay. Hey, Judy. We have Judy McLeod, our planning consultant, who is going to speak with us about community plan bylaw amendments for Snug Cove House Society.
Yes. I emailed it to you. I could do this one. Oh, okay. Sorry. Good news, I did a PowerPoint, but I don't have it here.
Hey, excellent.
I think this is pretty straightforward, and I'm sure you all remember it from the last meeting of council, where council authorized staff to bring back a report with regard to making some minor changes to the zoning of the Snug Cove House site, which is located between Bowen Court and Miller Road. And it's a mixed zoning,
which has two parts to it. So essentially, what we have done, in order to proceed with the OCP amendment, there was a minor, with the zoning amendment, there was a minor change to the official community plan, which essentially allows Snug Cove House to build with lot sizes smaller than the 372 square meters that are referenced in the OCP. So it's just that clause, except that lands between Bowen Court and Miller Road may be developed with smaller lot sizes, and it should be and a larger or a higher density as part of a comprehensive plan to provide for a mix of attached, detached, and supportive housing. So that would be the clause that essentially would be added to the OCP, as well as a little bit of tightening up of wording with regard to the property owner. With regard to the official community plan, with regard to the zoning, CD 15, Area 1, which is the Bowen Court, doesn't change essentially at all. So I've attempted to keep that exactly the same in the bylaw amendment before you. With regard to Area 2, which is that middle bit where the supportive housing is intended to go, the changes that are proposed would actually allow the addition of a detached dwelling, so that for the two lots that are in that area adjacent to the supportive housing building, they could have two attached dwellings. And the addition is that those two dwellings could have a suite attached in them if they were detached dwellings. Or there could be up to 4 attached dwellings, which would allow them to do 2 duplex units, or it could allow them to do a little townhouse block on Area 2. Area 1, which is the part of the bylaw that is along Miller Road, would be amended to remove the limit on the number of detached dwellings they could have. So if they wanted to do all small lot singles with suites in them, they could do that. They could also have the flexibility to do duplexes, or even combine some lots to do a townhouse option. The other 2 little additions that we have added, one is to add the possibility of suites in the attached dwellings. The other is something that I suggested to them, because I know from my earliest discussions with them, they were having a problem with the small unit size, because they are capped at 140 square meters, which is about 1,500 square feet for both detached and attached houses. And under the current zoning, there's no allowance for enclosed parking spaces. And I've been kind of concerned with the layout of this all along, and that there has been so much problem finding on-site parking, and I didn't think it was a particularly attractive way to proceed. So what I'm suggesting is that we add the possibility of 1 enclosed parking space that wouldn't be included within that 140 square meter building size, that would be allowed in addition to that. And that is a common thing in a number of municipalities where there is, given the gross floor area, that's allowed an allowance for an enclosed parking space. So with that, you have the 2 bylaws in front of you, as well as the Islands Trust policy statement. I would just remind you that, as usual, Councillor Morris has asked me to check my spelling. And within the bylaw, on page 2 of the bylaw, there is an extra detached in both maximum size for attached dwelling and maximum size for detached dwelling. There's comma detached. It's when you do the copy and paste, you should always check what you're copying and pasting. So those 2 should be removed. So
I'm sorry, what part of it
that is in the bylaw. It's the second page of the bylaw, under 2.2, under lot coverage.
And you want to remove the detached that's after the comma?
Yeah. After dwelling, the
second word, the second detached.
The second detached.
Okay, but the first detached stays there.
The first one should read the maximum size for attached dwelling, and then the second one is the maximum size for detached. So the detached should be removed from both of those.
after the detached after the comma.
Sorry, just looking at the bylaw, there's only really one page of substance there. Am I looking at the wrong bylaw?
There's LCDs.
Oh, okay.
Sorry, I'm looking at the wrong one.
Yes, the land use bylaw.
Gotcha.
And setbacks?
Pardon?
What setbacks, yeah?
I think I'm happy with the setbacks.
Well, the first line under setback says minimum setback from front lot line, bracket meters. The very last line of the setback says minimum setback from front lot line, bracket meters.
It should say rear, that one. Thank you very much. Again, cut and paste. I was in a hurry.
Yeah, Judy did a stellar turnaround on this, so there's found to
Questions, Commissioner?
Yes.
In your report, you talk about garage and carport. So this is just a question. Does a garage mean something fully enclosed or a carport?
I should have changed the report because as I was thinking about it when I was doing the bylaw, I think enclosed garage would be preferred.
And that's a garage, so by saying garage, not saying enclosed garage.
Yeah.
So we shouldn't say enclosed garage in the bylaw?
I would like to say enclosed garage and take out carport from my report.
No, that was in your report, but the bylaw right now just says an attached garage.
Yeah.
So should we have the word enclosed in there?
If you wish.
Well, you said you wanted an enclosed garage, so I guess that's my question.
Just to
Isn't
clarify.
a garage enclosed?
I don't know, that's what I don't know.
Well, I think the very definition of a garage is that it's an enclosed structure.
That was
So
my
I don't,
question.
yeah, I don't
The
think
definition
it's-
of a garage.
So, but now I'm misunderstanding. So you're saying that 140 square meters plus.
Yes.
We're adding the plus, so they now can add to the square footage that they're building on that lot and enclosed parking space
For one enclosed parking space.
for one car. But they could also do a carport, which wouldn't have anything to do with that, right? I mean, they can do a carport anyway.
They could do a carport anyway.
Yeah, so this is just adding the possibility of an enclosed spot if you want it. It's not requiring anything.
Could you build a carport on that lot that wasn't attached, that was detached?
You could build a parking space with a
Roof over it.
cover over it, as long as it met the cover.
Yeah, so this is just adding square footage available for construction if you did want to put a garage. Okay, I'm going to go to Sue Ellen and then Melanie.
Does this mean that somebody could, that this house could be built, a house could be built with an attached garage, as it says in the bylaw here, and people could fill it with stuff and then build a carport too? Under the way I'm reading it here, that would be allowed, right?
The lot would get pretty full.
Well, people traditionally sometimes do that, where they build a garage and they fill it with stuff and they park in their driveway. Or they turn it into a bedroom.
No,
Well,
I mean, that's...
I mean, that is in conflict with the bylaw, and that should not be done, and that would be something that... Okay, sorry, I took us off topic. Yeah. So they could also build a carport if there was room on the lot, within the setbacks. You know, let me double check all the ins and outs of this before we come back for second reading. I will follow up to make sure that I'm being totally accurate about this before we come back.
Melanie?
I have a question similar to Councillor Fast. Does having an enclosed garage really solve the problem of the parking? Because because these houses are going to be a little bit smaller, there's a greater chance that the garages get used for an alternative storage space. And so does that push the parking problem back onto the street? So I'm just wondering, will it solve the problem? That's where I'm not convinced.
I can't guarantee that it will solve the problem. I think that it's an opportunity to solve the problem, and people being people, they sometimes do it. It would provide an opportunity to, along Miller Road, there would have to be a space for a turnaround anyway, because you wouldn't want people backing out, but I think with the sketches that I'm seeing, I think that the architect is doing his best to
to do the design guidelines and make it an attractive project, but there is a lot of surface parking, and I think just the opportunity to provide for some of it to be enclosed would be an improvement to the appearance of this property.
So I just want to clarify that this is not the request of the applicant that this be added. This is your suggestion.
This is my suggestion
for
that it
better
would be-
design.
Yes.
That you feel that if people had the option of having an enclosed space, it would make the project more attractive.
And actually, it leads to the first conversation I think I had with Don Nicholson when he came and said, is parking, enclosed parking counted? Because I think initially they were feeling fairly constrained with the unit sizes that they had. So having looked at it and being familiar with other jurisdictions where there is some allowance for that, and it's something that I'm recommending to council that we consider.
Right. Maureen?
How big is an enclosed garage or carport?
It would be about 20 square meters.
Would it make sense to put a limit on it?
We could.
Well, you've got lot coverage as your limit.
Yeah.
I think it may make sense to put a limit.
Well, they said one car space for all.
Actually, it says one garage or carport.
Enclosed parking space, I believe is.
But how does it one parking?
Okay.
If council was comfortable, I mean, we certainly could say one parking space up to a maximum of.
I would prefer that.
Okay. And Sue Ellen?
Well, I'm thinking back to the official community plan, and the reason for encouraging more buildings in the Cove area was not for cars. It was to encourage walkability and pedestrians, and not necessarily to put up buildings for cars. So, my feeling is people choose to live close to the ferry partly so they can walk to the Cove and to the ferry and things like that. And I think that the purpose of this whole proposal is based on people in a denser kind of space, not necessarily cars. And I don't think everybody there might even have a car, especially since the bus goes right past it.
You have to still get groceries though at some point.
Yeah. But not two cars, I think.
Okay, we don't want to belabor this for too long. Did you want to make another point on it, Melanie?
No,
okay.
that's fine.
So what is before us is the planner's recommendation that we add to it the potential for putting in an enclosed parking spot if the applicant wants it on the lots that do become single family, right? So to me, it's a relatively minor point. We could either just vote on it or deal with it in some way.
Well, it's in the bylaws here now. In front of us.
Okay, so the addition has been made, it's in the bylaw, and we're giving bylaw first reading at this point. So this could be re-examined between now and second reading if people want to make points to you about it. Is that correct?
It's correct.
Yeah. So my inclination is to just pass it. What do you have to say, Allison?
I just was one little, I'm happy with generally what's written here, and I don't think we need to put in, since it says one parking space with an attached garage. Somebody could have a little car and have a small attached garage, somebody could have a slightly bigger car and have a slightly bigger attached garage. But that's fine. Having had a 1,400 square foot townhouse with an attached garage, one car, you've got lots of room on the sidewalk to hang ladders and stuff like that. I'm concerned about the lot coverage issue by adding a garage. 35% of 372 square meters in my arithmetic of 130.2 square meters. And you've got maximum size for an attached dwelling, so that means 2 floors, because 140 square meters is more than 130. So we're talking about a 2-floor dwelling. So basically the footprint, which would include your garage, is 130 square meters. So it's relatively small, so I don't see that you need to limit actual size of the garage.
Yeah, there is a bit of flex in what has been drawn now, so I think it would also.
But they are planning, if you're gonna go the full 140, you've got to go to a two-story structure,
Right.
especially if you want to have a
Or one and a
garage.
half or something.
Yeah.
Okay, yes, I think that's a valid point as well, is the fact that your lot coverage doesn't change. So if you're at, what is it, 35, 25?
Yeah.
Yeah, whatever it
At
is.
50
it
is
is
the other
anyway.
one, yeah.
So you're, whether you call it a garage or a place to put your ladder. It's going to be restricted by the amount of coverage on your lot anyway, more than anything else, I think. So anyway, sorry, go
Clarification,
ahead.
I was just going to say, for second reading, I think maybe if you bring back a report, just clarifying the concerns
With the current
garage.
and the size.
And address that for the second
And
reading.
I think I just would like to say, I do agree with Councillor Bass that the walkability is an important factor in limiting the amount of parking is important as well, but the units are allowed to have a space. It's actually 0.5 space for the attached, and I hope that it's kept limited, but they're planning to put them in anyway, so I think that it would make the units more saleable potentially, and also I'd rather not have to look at them all, and I think the design would be better if some of them were enclosed if they're going to be there anyway.
I think the ultimate goal is to give the applicant as much flexibility when they sell the units.
So they can do it or not.
I'm going to go to Allison.
Are they doing this to sell?
Not at this point. They're to be free.
Melanie?
I'm happy with the enclosed garage amendment, but as long as like the design encourages people to use the garage, there's not an opportunity, there's just not easy off-street parking on it, so I think that's where I would like to see the design go, that they're encouraged to keep their parking on their lot and not spill it onto public access.
Okay. Okay. Okay.
Just a quick point, I saw in your report that for the purposes of this OCP amendment, that we're also recommending that consultation for this amendment doesn't need to be early and often. Is that right? I'm thinking about it.
Ongoing?
Yeah, that was the first reading.
This is a minor amendment.
Yeah.
We don't have to go to all the neighborhoods.
The act requires you to consider whether it should be early and ongoing, and it gives you the opportunity. You do have to have an opportunity for one public input opportunity, but because it's so minor, the whole early and ongoing, I think you can make the resolution that no, it really doesn't have to be.
Thank you.
Okay. Yes.
May I bring up one more typo in the OCP law? 2, right at the beginning, that of, I think it should be that the Bowen Island Municipality Official Community Flag.
Okay.
Bring an amendment.
So, does someone have to read these recommendations?
Yes.
Yes?
Yes.
Well, that ain't me. Sorry, one more point.
Yeah, I'd like to move the recommendation.
Okay, go for it.
All right. The first one is that council, in consideration of the limited scope of the proposed OCP amendment bylaw 403/2016, determine that opportunities for consultation with regard to the proposed official community plan amendment bylaw 403/2016 are not required to be early and ongoing. Can I just keep going? Yeah, all of them?
Yes, there can be all resolutions.
Second one, that bylaw 403/2016 cited as Bowen Island Municipal Official Community Plan bylaw 282/2010 amendment bylaw 403/2016 be read a first time. That bylaw 404/2016 cited as Bowen Island Municipality Land Use bylaw 57/2002 amendment bylaw.
Sorry. Please go ahead, I just have clarification of your
404/2016 be read a first time. So that's the land use bylaw one. And that pursuant to section 879 of the Local Government Act, staff be directed to arrange a public open house and to receive public input with regard to these applications prior to consideration of the second reading of the bylaws. That bylaws, and that final one, that bylaws 403-2016 and 404-2016 refer to the Islands Trust municipal departments and the advisory planning commission, and that staff report back to council with the results of the referral of these applications.
Do I have a seconder?
Second.
Okay, anyone want to discuss the motion?
Just a quick clarification.
Okay.
Sorry, Casey, this was passed, it wasn't severed, so it's all one resolution.
Yeah.
Okay. And all in favor? It's passed unanimously, I believe. Thank you.
And happy Burns Day to you all.
Yes, happy Burns Day. Happy Burns Day. Really? Yes. Quick break? We're going to take a quick break?
Yes.
Just so that we can warn the rest of you that we're here, so that you will leave, and then we can discuss things publicly after the
Easy.
Tangled up in wires and
Dangerous. That I don't have much knowledge of. But hopefully for the next meeting.
Student, yes, I didn't realize that I should be reading these things on the
Because I was to use my app. No, there was something wrong with it. That's what it was. It was an access issue, so we fixed it this morning. Yeah, I couldn't hear it. Yeah.
And that's why I couldn't I was physically with the committee of the whole because we had 2 reports. I did that as a, I just was running out of time sitting down.
Yeah, no, that was a nice thing.
But I highlighted everything I could comment on, so maybe what I'll do is just print it because,
Yeah. It's a tall order.
You are really excited to change.
We're gonna put straight roll in here. That's all. Yeah. This is quite an operation.
Must have been when that was shaking.
Oh my goodness.
Oh, right. No, if I'm not able to do it, we don't want to be standing there.
I don't want to be
Stuff.
waiting. And you need to go, before 12:15.
No, I know, we're not
Sarah's on time.
So if you're not out, I'll go and you can.
Yes, thank you. Good thing you mentioned that.
That's true.
Yeah. You might take it personally if I didn't show up to you.
Oh, okay.
Can I do a little wording? I've got some sort of processing questions on change subject of the thing, it's tweaky.
Right.
So that would, the resolution to say council directs that to issue the request for proposal. If you change that to F, then that allows a little latitude to tidy up. So,
Oh, gotcha.
yeah.
Okay. Is that something that was pulled from the consent agenda?
Yeah, it's under new business, it was never,
Oh.
it wasn't in the consent.
Oh, okay, good. Okay. We should kind of get on with things here, I think, because we have Kristen, and she just costs us so much money.
We're a little bit behind, so I will try and move along quickly. We're ready to go?
Yes, please.
I'm bringing this report forward for two purposes. One is a statutory requirement within the community charter that requires that council consider a few things in the process of adopting their 5-year financial plan each year. And the second is to bring forth some ideas around some new methods of funding some of the things in the financial plan that we normally have funded. So I'd like to propose some changes to the way we traditionally fund things. So first of all, I'll just walk you through the community charter, the statutory requirement process. And that is that before the 5-year financial plan is ultimately adopted, council needs to consider two things. And the first being the property tax ratio among the different classes of property that's established by council from time to time. Council sets one rate. It sets the rate of it sets the residential tax rate, and then it decides on a ratio, which is a multiple of that tax rate that is going to be applied to every other class of property on Bowen Island. So on page 3 of 6 of my report, the rate that has been, the proportion of tax rates that has been established by past councils and has continued to be in place is that utilities will pay 4.16% of what residential properties pay. Major industry and light industry as well will pay 4.16%. Business and recreational properties will both pay the same rate of tax as a residential property, and farm will pay half the rate of a residential property. So that is without direction from council to change the ratios. You know, that's a method of tax shifting the tax burden from, say, residential to more businesses. Without direction from council to change that, that's the understanding that I will use to go and prepare the 5-year financial plan and the annual tax rate bylaw. Secondly, before adopting any financial plan, council must consider the use and the impact to the community of any permissive tax exemptions that have been granted. And I'd just like to take this opportunity to remind council of the policy that's in place. It does require that the total of the permissive tax exemptions, the total value of the permissive tax exemptions, does not exceed 1.5% of the prior year's property taxation revenue. And it also requires that no residential properties, no residential dwellings within a eligible property be given an exemption from taxation. So in October of 2015, council did adopt tax exemption bylaw 394. The impact of that bylaw is estimated at this point to reduce the total value of property by $16,390,000, which would result in forgiven tax revenue of approximately $44,223, and that value will be shifted to all of the remaining other properties on Bowen Island. If someone were to have owned a property worth about $650,000, the impact of this bylaw would be that they would pay about an additional $18.83 per year, and that's based on the 2015 tax rates. The next part of the report, I'd like to advise council that we did take this draft financial plan to the Finance Advisory Committee on December 3rd. The very first draft of the 2016 financial plan did contemplate a tax rate increase of 1.5% for the year, but I do wish to caution council that with new information put forth by managers, there have been some additional budget requests since December 3rd, plus information gleaned from the strategic planning process. I will be putting some new things into the budget, and I'll be bringing that forward to a future meeting of council for your consideration, and it will be higher than 1.65 at this point. The next thing I'd like to discuss is the way that the garbage, the solid waste program is currently funded on Bowen Island. This is currently funded through a combination of parcel tax and DECL sales. And through some discussions with community members, feedback that we have received, some anecdotal evidence that have been gathered over the years, we get a lot of people questioning, why do I pay all my taxes and why do I have to purchase a garbage DECL at the same time? So in conversation with community members and also with Metro Vancouver staff, it's been suggested that the added cost to purchase a garbage DECL on top of the parcel tax actually encourages public dumping. It encourages dumping in public waste receptacles or in neighbors' garbage cans, or also increases the likelihood of backyard burning. I took the opportunity to discuss with Louise McIntosh of Bowen Waste if the municipality were to get rid of the sale of garbage DECLs and fund the solid waste program 100% on the tax bill, if that would pose any problems or present any issues for collection for Bowen Waste. And she did not identify any issues with that. I do anticipate that the parcel tax covers 1 can per property. So for those situations where you have multiple dwellings on one property, where you would have 2 cans at the end of the driveway, then those additional properties would still need to pay a second user fee to get that service. And we think that that's fair, but it would cut down significantly on the number of DECLs that are required to be sold, would cut down significantly on the administrative cost and time and ordering of DECLs and all of that. As well, for those certain times where you have additional garbage and wanted to put a couple extra bags out, we would still expect that that the one-time use DECL of $6 would still be required to get that extra pickup for the extra more than 1 can per bi-weekly pickup. The impact to property tax owners, the financial impact of this, would be that it would likely increase the garbage parcel tax currently from about $218 to about $277. This is an increase of about $59 per year. And given the cost of a garbage DECL is going to probably be about $93 for 2016, most property owners would benefit from this shifting of the tax from the combined collection method. I did bring this concept forward to the Finance Advisory Committee in December, and they did endorse that proposal, and they endorsed that proposal unanimously. The next change in funding mechanism that I'd like to bring forth as a concept for council to consider is the way that the Community Parks Department is funded. It's currently funded through a parcel tax, which is $100 per property. And what this is and why it's done this way is it's an old carryover from the regional district when the GBRD managed the parks function. Their method of collecting costs from a discrete group of taxpayers was to do parcel taxes. Parcel taxes is a flat rate, basically a flat rate tax per property owner. So it's not really in keeping with the ad valorem property tax system, which we have in British Columbia, which is property tax based on the value of your home. Municipalities still do use parcel taxes, but they use them for defined discrete services with a very fixed cost and an end date. So they use them often for debt or for services that they don't undertake themselves, rather they're contracted out, such as the garbage service that we have. So I am proposing that the Community Parks Program, given that it has evolved into a full-service municipal department, just like our Public Works Department or our Planning Department, that it too be funded with the same method of ad valorem property taxation. There was concern raised in this change of how the funding was collected from property owners, in that the way that we do it now, if there's surplus parks parcel tax funds that are unspent at the end of the year, then we take those funds and we deposit them into the Community Parks Reserve Fund. So if council wished, they could direct me to take any unspent budget funds from the Community Parks budget at the end of the year and continue to deposit those funds into the Community Parks Reserve. So what I'm proposing by shifting this from a parcel tax to an ad valorem tax is not that we would have fewer dollars available to pay for the community parks function, but rather who pays those dollars is going to shift around a little bit. The funding would still be the same, and if council wished, they could still continue to augment from year to year the Community Parks Reserve Fund with surplus funding. So this proposal was brought forth to the Finance Advisory Committee on December 3rd as well. And that was also carried with one member of the Finance Committee in opposition. Next, I wanted to advise you that we have met with all of the Water and Sewer Committees throughout the month of December. We managed to get 7 of 8 financial plans for 2016 adopted. We have an additional meeting scheduled for Cove Bay Local Advisory Committee, where we hope to get that budget approved as well. And I'm really pleased about that, by the way, because usually we're doing that in March. So I'm really thrilled that we've got those under our belt. Lastly, I'd just like to advise you of my updated timeline that I believe that we can get the financial plan adopted for 2016 by council. So I'm proposing that at the next council meeting on February 9th, that the new draft budget that incorporates all of the changes from the new information from managers and any information gleaned from strategic planning, that I will bring that new budget forward to you. I would like then, through direction from council, to take that to a public budget consultation process between the 22nd and 15th of March. I anticipate that that would look like the report that I bring on February 9th will be distributed widely through electronic means and through email and through our social media blast. And as well, I'm hoping that I can roll it out on this Place Speak. I've got a lot of, it's a steep learning curve for me. I've never used it before, but I'm really hoping that this will be an opportunity to use this method to put the budget out there for public consultation. I anticipate on March 29th, the council meeting of March 29th, that I will come back to council with the results of the public feedback consultation process. And given that process, council will direct me to make any amendments or changes to the financial plan at that time. Sometime between April 4th and 15th, I'm hoping to arrange a finance committee meeting where they can have, the finance committee members can have one last look at it before it goes to council for final adoption. It can come forward on April 25th for 3 readings and a 4th and final adoption on May 9th. It does need to be adopted by May 15th to be enforced for the year. So in conclusion, I'm providing this information to council. I want to give you a broad overview of the development process of the financial plan to date, and as well to give you a chance to review those policies that are statutory requirements before the financial plan is adopted. And this is done to ensure a continued fair distribution of all of the property taxes in our community. So I have 3 recommended resolutions at the front of the report that I would recommend that council pass at this point.
Yes.
I just, the resolutions that are in Kristen's report are slightly different from the resolutions that are in the agenda report, and I think there's a couple of edits that have to be made before that they were actually moved.
Okay.
So from a process perspective, I can leave them with the edits now, or you can have a discussion and then I'll move them later.
Can we, I'd like to sever these into 3 separate
Okay.
and distinct discussions.
Yep.
So if I could have a motion for, in reference to the garbage decals.
Okay, so I'll move the council direct that the sale of garbage decals be discontinued and that the garbage decal parcel tax be increased to cover 100% of the solid waste program. And in case you know from the agenda, I've deleted the word staff in there. So it's as written in Kristen's report.
Oh, very well.
Okay. Can I have a seconder? Okay. Is there any need to discuss this one?
Yeah, I've got a question, and it's one that Bill Granger brought up as well. You mentioned 100% of the solid waste program. Is that intended to include the special solid waste days?
No, it's not. It's the majority of it. Additional revenues would be generated through the sale of second cans and one-time use only. So I will have to come up with an estimate revenue and the parcel tax be established to cover the remaining.
Yeah, the others will be incidental.
In the big scheme of things, yeah.
So the rest is tiny.
Yes.
Yeah, go ahead, Sue.
Can I just make sure I understand the part about the $59 versus $93?
Yes.
So the cost savings by streamlining, getting rid of the charming, old-fashioned, and well-loved, but now not needed decals, that cost saving would reduce the $93 down to $59?
Correct. Yes.
Well, no. What happens is you spread it over every property.
Yeah. So
Basically,
properties who have vacant properties who don't have homes and wouldn't normally purchase a decal are now going to be paying $59 more.
Yeah.
It seems like a big spread for...
Yeah, it wasn't inefficiencies, no.
Yeah, no.
I'll go to Melanie, please.
I'm just wondering, I maybe I've overlooked it in your report, but is there a communication strategy to let the community know that there's this welcome change coming?
Yes,
along?
I'm going to have to work with Sophie to help if that is adopted by council, then I would work with Sophie to get the word out, get the message out, and you through our social media engine.
And Allison?
So just with the parcel tax, could a vacant property apply to be removed from the parcel tax roll because they don't require garbage pickup?
This service covers our public space waste as well. We have a lot of properties that are in that situation now. If you think of the waterfront properties over in Mount Gardner that only have water access and can't get curbside service, nobody has ever contemplated that they should be excluded from the parcel tax.
Okay. We don't really need to talk about garbage parcel tax too much, do we, Sue Ellen?
Well, just with regard to Maureen's question, should we remove the words 100% of the solid waste program? Just remove the word 100%.
That would be one of our budget principles, Kristen.
And then the budget policy?
Yeah.
But right now it's not covered 100%, right? So
No.
the resolution's a little...
So if you take out the 100%,
Yeah.
the increase to cover the costs of the solid waste
Yeah.
program, I think you're
Okay,
effectively.
then I'm prepared to move.
Okay.
We already moved in.
Oh, yeah.
Okay, do we have a friendly amendment to remove the 100%? Is that work for you, Allison?
It's fine with me, but I'm not sure from process-wise we can do that. It's been moved and seconded.
We can do that, whether or not it flies at the end of the day.
I move to amend the motion on the floor to remove 100% from recommendation 1.
100% off.
To cover the costs and replace with the costs of the solid waste program.
Sure.
Council Cass is just doing it properly process-wise, amending the motion officially.
Pretty cool. Okay. Seconded.
No flies on us.
All in favor of the amended motion passed unanimously. So moving right along, the council directed that the parks parcel tax be rescinded and funding for the community parks department be provided through the ad valorem collection of taxes. I'd like to speak on that before we actually pass the motion. I am not in favor of that. And I think that the unique thing about that parcel tax was this was set up because we were so underserved by parks, and this was a sort of a defined amount of money that was now going to be spent to fix up those community parks, to get us up to where we should be as far as recreational facilities in the community parks and all that stuff. We never did it, right? It all gets thrown into a reserve. I think that this would be something where in the future we may well want to do it. I understand the principle of going to ad valorem, but I wouldn't like to just throw that out overnight. I'd like to see us quite a bit more process involved in whether or not we're going to make that switch. And hopefully in the parks master planning, there will be something to actually use all that money we've been saving up all these years to finish these parks that we leave unfinished and just doing nothing with. So that's my personal take on it. If somebody wants to move it, go ahead. No. Is anyone keen to get rid of that parcel tax? Did anyone want to speak to it?
May I just ask, and I should know this, but I don't, how much money is currently in the Parks Reserve, and how much money roughly goes in every year?
There's about $540,000 in there. And how much goes in every year? This year there'll be zero going in. Other years there have been probably $25,000 of annual budget surplus for projects that weren't undertaken or deferred until the next year.
Okay. And if we were not to pass this recommendation, how would you handle the funding of the Parks Department?
Somebody has to pay the bill. Our parks budget is increasing this year over last year. We have some new services added to parks, which we've never had before. So $100 per parcel is going to have to change every year and be set to equal the amount of the parks budget that's passed for the year. So this year, likely one can expect that the parks parcel tax to cover the cost of the Parks Department will go up to about $120 for the year.
Oh, we've gone over the 100 now.
Well, we're going to have to.
Is this the first time?
Yes, because we've added costs to the Parks Department that we've never had before.
Okay, so in the past, 100 was always more than we needed. Now
Correct.
It's not.
Correct.
It's less than we need. Oh,
Correct.
well, that changes the discussion a lot, doesn't
It
it?
doesn't, it still changes the concept of if we don't spend it, it goes into the reserve. We haven't speaking of
Yes. Was there anyone ahead of Allison? Were you ahead of?
Yeah, I think so. Just that, I think this, like the garbage depots, it may be one of those things that's left over from back when we were in Metro Vancouver. It was the only way that, way back 20 years ago, that we could save up for a big project like all athletic fields, for example, which, you save up 15 years, you might have a significant chunk that allows you to get a start on a big project. And then I just would like to know more from what you just said. Would this still have a saving up kind of function?
I would advise that if council's interested in a saving up function, then they look at a dedicated long-term funding strategy to fund parks and make a dedicated contribution like we do with our Civic Facilities Center, like we do with our fire hall replacement building. We dedicate $50,000 a year and put it into that fund. We dedicate $30,000 a year and put it into the Civic Facilities Fund.
Thank you, that's great.
So that we separate operation from
Capital.
We make a dedicated contribution to that. Under this method, it's ad hoc. If there's some left over at the end of the year, great, it goes in. If there's not, too bad. It's going to go wanting. So
Okay, Allison? you
Well,
want to
picking
speak?
up on that, when you squeeze through your budget and you don't want to raise taxes, then the reserve contributions are the things that usually get cut. I've sort of, because it's new, and it's, I mean, there's things missing in this report from a public consultation perspective as well, which is nowhere in the report does it say how much money is raised by the parks parcel tax, and it doesn't contemplate the impact to the taxpayer. And so I don't think we've got a full and fulsome set of facts, and that's plus my concern about if you don't spend it all, it doesn't go into the reserve pot. Those were the reasons why I was voting against it and will continue to vote against it.
Okay. And Kristen?
Well, overall, there is not going to be an impact to the general taxpayer. There's going to be an impact to who pays that money. In the end, the same amount of money is going to be collected to cover the cost of the Parks Department's budget. It's just, do we collect it as a flat tax, or do we collect it in the same method that we collect every other municipal department from? So overall, there wouldn't be a budget impact that I could identify for you. We're collecting the same amount of money, we're just taking it from different pockets.
Yeah.
But there's no report on the impact of those different pockets.
I liked the idea that it was just $100, right? Every year it was $100. You say parks, $100. Life goes on. But if we now start saying no, parks is now $118, and next year parks is $127, then we've lost our argument of this being kind of a clean, simple way to add to reserves, because we're not adding to reserves. So I'm reversing myself on this one. I think maybe it is time to get rid of the parcel tax if it's too small. I don't want to start showing increases in parcel taxes every year when we're going against the ad valorem system.
I'm in the same boat as you. I'd just like to say I support this recommendation and I'm ready to make it.
Can we put an amendment that we get a report back on setting up a reserve fund at the budget time?
There is a community parks reserve fund.
Oh, there is. Okay,
Yes.
so we just have to,
Yes.
at the budget time, decide on if we want to allocate money.
The question I think that remains to be asked, if the concern is that the annual contributions that are made to increase that reserve, is an additional resolution to direct staff to transfer any unspent parks budget surplus to the community parks reserve at the end of the year, if there's any. And that is the exact same method that we're using now. We're contributing unspent parks to the community parks reserve and making those ad hoc.
Okay, we're going to go to Maureen and then Gary.
The 540,000 is currently in the Parks Reserve.
Yeah.
We're not exactly burning through that, are we?
This year we are, and when I present the updated financial plan, I will bring you some clear direction about, or clear information about where the cost for some of the parks project is coming from. Some of them we are making some withdrawals from that reserve fund this year. Okay. Yeah.
Just a quick comment on the ad valorem. If, let's just say on the parcel tax, everybody's paying $100 a month.
Mm-hmm.
So obviously a lot of people, they're going to be paying a lot less than $100 a month. Right? Sorry, a year. Yeah. I mean, obviously, if there's X number of dollars that has to be raised, and now you're doing it under the appraised value system, a lot of people are going to be having their taxes reduced. That part of their taxes reduced. A lot of people may increase significantly.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't think the numbers are that big. We're only talking $100 a year, probably anyway, even on the higher end. They might double or something like that.
On the very highest end.
Yeah.
So
I don't see it as a huge problem.
If you want to speak to
Just to say, I like the ad valorem system better than a flat parcel tax. I think it brings a little bit more to affordability, especially when we hear that overall taxes might be higher than a tax rise is anticipated to be higher than 1.5 under the way we're thinking now. So I would support this, and I'm ready to move it. If council's ready.
Sure.
That council direct that the parks parcel tax be rescinded and funding for the community parks department be provided through an ad valorem collection of taxes. I'll second that.
Seconded. Any further discussion on the motion? All those in favor? Those opposed? So moved.
And I have the second motion.
In reference to that one or the last one on our list here?
In reference to that one,
Okay.
that council direct staff to assign any unspent funds to the Community Parks Reserve.
Okay. Seconder of that one?
Any unspent parks budget.
Yeah, Parks Budget Fund, sorry, yes.
Okay. Doesn't make it. Yeah, that's probably a good idea, because we're going to want to build a reserve at some point anyway. Okay, we have a seconder from Gary. Any?
Just wait.
Hang on, let me
Wait,
just,
to direct staff to sign any unspent parks budget funds.
to the Community Parks Reserve.
And that's accurate? In terms of
I-
language?
How about that council directs staff to contribute unspent budget surplus to the Community Parks Reserve?
Unspent parks budget, not surplus, generally. Because it's parks budget.
Yeah,
To contribute
unspent parks budget.
budget surplus.
Community Parks Reserve.
Isn't that the same, unspent and surplus?
Parks budget surplus.
Yeah,
Okay.
it's good ways around there.
Okay.
Oh, so
Okay.
take over the word unspent.
Okay.
That council
Yes.
directs staff to contribute parks budget surplus.
Unspent parks.
Casey's brought it up.
Oh, sorry. The council directs staff to contribute unspent park budget,
Surplus.
take out the word surplus.
Oh, it's surplus, you want to take out surplus.
Yeah. Either one of them, that'll do. To the Community Parks Reserve.
Okay. Have a seconder? Any further discussion on that one? All in favor? Okay, carried that. And the third one, the council consider the revised timeline for the
Yeah,
five-year
that's
financial
the
plan.
wrong motion, because
Oh.
it doesn't make sense.
Okay.
The council endorsed the revised timeline for the 5-year financial plan adoption period. So I changed consider to endorse, and I deleted the whole last phrase.
Our suggestion changed. Okay, we have that passed, and do I have a seconder? Do I have any further discussion? Okay, all in favor? Passed unanimously, thank you. Daniel,
Thank you.
thank you.
Thank you, Kristen.
Billington Road.
So thank you, Mayor and Council. So I'm here today to do the introduction for a development variance permit application. So from the Hearst family, who you saw Brendan Hearst present this morning, at 1780 Billington Road. So in terms of location, it's located essentially at the end of Woods Road becomes Billington Road. So past, right on the northern shore of Bowen Island, basically at the end of the road. So the road ends at this Lot 6 property, so right on the northern edge next to the large Crown land property. So the variance permit application, as you've heard, is for the variance to the setback to the sea, so it's to build a house that extends, as you see here. So this is roughly the site plan. The coast is shown on the survey plan, and this line along here is the 30-meter setback. So on the site, the driveway comes in at this point, coming into a rough flat area here. The cliff starts roughly immediately next to the driveway. The driveway also slopes down at this point, so though there's not contours here, it slopes down, and roughly there's a flat area, sort of in this area, sort of a lip, or a sort of ledge, and then there's a further cliff that goes down. So what they're proposing is this sort of longer, skinny building to fit between existing trees on the site. So, but it does extend into that 30-meter setback. So at the shortest point at this end, it's 14.04 meters. And I believe that this is actually to the edge of a deck, and so the actual wall of the building sits a few feet further back than that, where the sort of the wall and the roof of the building are. So this is the whole property is about 8 acres in site. So it's a little fuzzy to read the contours, but roughly you can see here where the contours are all close together. This is the cliff. the road as it goes is extended along here. There's a flatter area sort of in this area, but that's been seen as sort of a potential site for if there ever was to be a road extension. So in Bowen, the North Road comes along, that's the end of the road. If it ever was to extend, it would extend along this flat area to extend into the Crown land, if that ever were to happen. There are flatter areas in the south of the property, but the current driveway comes down to this point, and so seeing road construction up to a higher point would be quite considerable construction. And then so I put on the contour roughly where the 30-meter setback is and roughly the proposed house location. So what we're here tonight is notice that we'll consider on the February 22nd meeting and authorize staff to give notice to neighbors. And especially with this site, I'd probably recommend that organizing a site visit to visit the site and see the actual layout of the site. So that's what I have. Any questions, I'm happy to answer.
Approximately how many neighbors are there within 100 meters?
So there's two properties that are in the Crown land that would be within 100 meters. So I mean, kind of looking at the map, Gary, you can see that the Crown land, so the Crown would receive it, and then roughly those first two houses on this side. In this side, it would be, I think, the 2 or 3 neighbors around, but they're all currently still owned by the tenant family that live in the lot of the subdivision, who have put in a letter of support.
Would those Crown lots be within 100 meters, if it's 300 feet?
I did just a quick buffer, and they are just within, because the strip of Crown land is quite narrow, and those lots are pretty narrow.
Oh, okay, fair enough.
Yeah.
I'm just thinking of the historical siting as you drive along Woods Road to get to those properties.
Yeah.
They're also much closer than a lot of them.
Yeah.
Minimal disruption to the land is another positive, so I think we should definitely, consider the variance.
Yeah, I went out and looked at it, and
So did I. There's a huge cliff
I mean, let them do it. There's just no. I mean, they're not trying to max anything out here or get away with anything. It's not going to be an eyesore from the water. They're in the middle of nowhere as far as affecting their neighbors, and if they put it right in the middle of the lot, their only encroachment is on the sea and very, very high bank. So I have no problem with this one at all.
This is just for Claire. I'm just curious to know, what was the objective of the 30-meter zoning setback? Like, what was the purpose when it was put into effect? What's it to protect? Is it environmental, visual impact on the water?
Yeah, so I'm not sure sort of the history of the setback to the sea, and it is an odd one the way it's written in our bylaw in terms of it says you need to be 30 meters back from the sea. Then the next clause says if you can be the average of your neighbors away from the sea. If your neighbors are both as little as 15 meters away from the sea, you can be 15 meters. And then it says if your neighbors are as little as 7.5, you can be 7.5 provided you produce an environmental and a geotech report without going to council. So there are provisions in terms of the siting of the neighborhoods you can be closer than the 30 meters.
That's
Which it does.
historical significance.
Yeah.
I mean, if your house burnt down or something,
Yeah.
why should you be forced to?
Yeah.
Of course, the other thing that happens is if you force somebody back 100 feet from the ocean, all the trees go in front of it. Whereas if you can move the house forward and it'll take away any of the trees, and it's much better for the shoreline.
So what happens on this one, though, in, say, 50 years' time, when someone wants to build a bigger place? The
Nothing. It's high bank. This is the edge of a cliff.
Cliff's 70 feet high.
Yeah.
I mean, essentially,
I'm just saying, does it set of, right now, the design is all very in keeping, but for a subsequent, is there
New variant.
Yeah, so in terms of expansion, so the owners or they sold it, future owners could expand the house behind the 30 meters mark without a variance, right? So essentially, right now, about half the house would be within the setback and half wouldn't be. So they could expand that back half, but if they wanted to expand anything within the setback, they need to come back for a variance.
Okay. I'd like to try not to spend too much time on this one. What would you like to say?
Just that I was reassured to see the thorough environmental report in here, and that they're planning to keep the trees and the small end of the house facing the water. If a future owner decided to cut down all those trees, could
Yeah, I don't believe we have bylaws about tree
retention.
Unless you're in a watershed area, or yes, some properties have covenants on them.
Covenants is an interesting idea. That's all I said.
Yeah. Fair enough. So can somebody who has a good voice read this?
I'll move that notice be given that council will be considering the issuance of development variance permit DVP 08-2015 for the, that's the right number, even though this is 2016.
Yeah, because it's when the application is.
For the variance and setback regulations for 1780 Billington Road, legally described as straddle lot 6. Put a space in there, Casey, between lot and 6. District lot 2958, BCS 4476, PID 028-883-942, at the February 22nd, 2016 meeting of council. The council authorized staff to give notice for consideration of issuance of development variance permit DDP 08-2015 in accordance with section 922. Is that the right section given the new rewrite of the Local Government Act? To all properties within 100 meters of the legal boundary of 1780 Billington Road, legally described as straddle lot 6, district lot 2958, BCS 4476, PID 028-883-942.
Second. All in favor? Passed unanimously. Okay, thank you, Diana. So the next one, this is this Build Canada stuff where the municipalities are now asking that the federal government go 50% instead of 33%. And we got a letter from Langley, I think it was, saying you guys should really send this out too, and we said, yeah, okay. So I don't know much more about it than that. It's in your agenda package, the actual letter itself, and I did read it at some point. So I think we probably should. We definitely want more funding from the federal government if we can get it. And we all know that municipalities are being starved to death by the lack of infrastructure funding.
And they're creating the infrastructure.
Yeah. Yes, Allison.
I tried to find the Langley report on the website, and I don't know whether Mayor Schaefer said anything to you, but
No.
who's going to pay the other 50%?
Well, I believe that the idea is that either the province has to be a signatory to the deal, so how much do they pay?
Yeah, I mean, so
Right, if
the
they
idea
stay
that,
with the third, if they stay with the third,
Yeah.
and so we get it up to 83% and we're paying 17%, wouldn't that be sweet?
well, that would be sweet, but if more becomes, the other
They might have 25%.
30 and 20,
Yeah,
and
I know.
our share was, so that, it was just unclear. And the other thing would be that the motion, at this point, we don't want to forward it to all the other member municipalities. I think this motion should be forwarded to the Lower Mainland Local Government Association. Because what they're going to do is send this is going to LMLGA for endorsement to then go, or it be forwarded to the FCM, because that's where they're wanting. So I guess it should be forwarded to FCM, that we're supporting their motion.
Oh, it's the FCM resolution.
Yes,
Okay.
yes, yeah.
So we want to
That this
send a
motion
letter
be-
adding our support.
Be forwarded to FCM. Period, yeah.
And
copy to
sorry, to Pamela.
And Langley, so they know we sent it.
Oh, right. Depending on the Langley.
City of Langley.
And send to FCM.
Yeah, so that second paragraph should read that this motion be forwarded to FCM and copy to the City of Langley. And that the motion be forwarded to Pamela.
Okay. Did someone actually have to read that one too?
Yeah.
Okay, I'm
Maureen
sorry.
had her hand up.
Yeah, my apologies. I was going to get to the table.
It would also be forwarded to Jordan Sturdy.
Okay, sure. Add to the list.
I have a question. This is regarding nationally significant projects, or the projects provide a greater national benefit. So I'm not sure that this applies to, would ever apply to Golden Island grants. Maybe, maybe not. And I'm wondering if you've got an idea of the kind of infrastructure grant. Would this be like a transportation one for the Lower Mainland?
Water treatment, I think,
Ah.
is a maybe, because they've made the Clean Water Act. People have to get water treatment plants built across the country. It's got to be, and Pam had said that this was one of the 3 pots that they were wanting to put a lot of money into. So I would hope that we qualify for that.
Then I might propose taking out the section that says, and whereas for nationally significant projects where projects provide a greater national benefit. And
But if you read the Langley thing, there's pots to the Bill Canada Fund right now. And there is this nationally significant pot, there's a regionally significant pot, and there's a community pot.
so I'm wondering why we're dealing with the nationally significant pot and not the community pot.
That's a different resolution.
I thought the 3 pots were transportation infrastructure or water and sewer.
Those are their priorities, but they're not the money pots.
Oh, because that's what Pam had said. She said we have 3 distinct pots of money. One for
Well,
water
and
and
that's
wastewater,
the
one
other
for
issue with this
transportation, one
whole
for
thing
housing.
that we were talking about on Thursday and Friday is we don't know if this, whether the feds will be changing the criteria and the mix of the pot and stuff like that. Because this has all come from the previous set of guidelines that are in place right now.
Okay.
And we don't even know if they're going to change the guidelines for this particular intake for the small community.
I propose that we defer this until you can give us some clarification.
Well, or we could simply send a letter of support to the FCM resolution. So FCM will have passed the resolution, and we can add our support to whatever their resolution is.
Well, what Langley has done is they're sent this resolution to FCM, and they want FCM to endorse this resolution.
Oh, I see.
It's sort of FCM's the Canadian federal version of the Canada-wide version of the UBCM conference.
Right.
So, Federation of Canadian Municipalities.
Right.
So they do resolutions just like we do on the floor at UBCM, and more directed to the federal government and federally wide things.
Because this speaks specifically to the national
That's right.
infrastructure component,
Yeah.
which I think is these nationally significant projects.
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, maybe, but I don't know how you define that. But I'm going to let Melanie jump in for a second.
I'm really supportive of the intent of this resolution. I'm just wondering if we need to defer and come back with something that's more reflective of the Bowen situation. So, and feed into the answer.
Go ahead.
I think we have a request from the City of Langley to express support for the resolution as proposed. We want to have further discussion about non-nationally significant projects. That's another day, another resolution.
Okay.
Yeah, I don't think it has to do with what we want. I think it has to do with this resolution. There's the support of that resolution. Okay.
I would actually then change the wording where it's just to say that Bonan Municipal Council supports the resolution of the City of Langley regarding X, and send such letter of support to FCM.
Yeah.
You're just showing good neighborliness.
So we could just, in the letter of support, just in Bonan Municipality supports the resolution proposed by the following resolution proposed by the City of Langley.
And supports FCM dealing with this.
Yeah.
So that's clear as mud.
Yeah, I know. I'm filling in gaps here I don't have, but.
So what do you want me to do? What's the motion? Sorry.
I'm really
So that the Bonan Municipal Council support the resolution from the City of Langley regarding.
Township.
See if I can find
No,
that.
it's the city.
Well, and a township.
No, they're different.
This is from the city. Yeah. From the City of Langley regarding the federal government's Bill Canada grant program, national infrastructure components, to be amended to fund a minimum of 50% of the project cost. So you're just saying what the City of Langley is proposing. That's regarding section, and so Bonan Municipal Council supports their recommendation, as I've just stated, and that Bonan Municipal Council indicates to FCN that they sorry, repeating myself.
This motion be forwarded to FCM.
Yes, yeah.
So if you look at page 239 of our agenda, the resolution that we have,
Township
annually.
line, it says township.
Is that the township?
Yeah, right.
Oh, is that where you saw?
Okay, now maybe there's one from the city too.
There is.
There is.
The township one is a nicer resolution. Well, no, page 239, all we've got is the township.
Yeah.
And that's quite different from what's on our agenda page, which is the one from the city of Langley.
Let's just support the resolution.
Yeah, so the request from both of them is that this motion be forwarded to Metro Vancouver municipalities to request their endorsement. So we don't need to pass the same resolution, we just need the letter. And none of them talk about 50%. The city of Langley talks about 50%. The township
Doesn't
talk about 50%.
just portion it.
So we've got two different resolutions.
Is time of the essence is my question on this one.
I don't know when the conference
The Federation of BC Municipalities?
is. Yeah,
I think it's in February.
there's something happening around the end of February.
Yeah.
Whether that's their sustainability conference or their annual conference.
It's the sustainability in February.
Okay, so the annual conference is later. There's usually a 3 to 6 month lag to get these things out of the agenda package. So our endorsement could just be that we received the resolutions from both the City of Langley and the Township of Langley, and do agree that and endorse the increase of the national share or something, or the concept of increasing the national share. So we haven't picked either one.
I propose that the mayor write a letter to the city of Langley and the township of Langley supporting their resolutions.
But that's
And
not,
they can,
that's not what they're requesting. They want the communication to be between us and FCM.
The more municipalities they have supporting this resolution, a better chance they have of it going on their agenda.
How about we recommend that staff prepare a letter for signature, put over the mayor's signature to support the
resolution from.
principles, resolutions, concepts, whatever you like.
Resolutions, how about resolutions?
Let Lori.
Yeah, I do.
The concepts contained in the two resolutions from the city and township of Langley.
So you want, because we will serve, we want the resolution to show support, so it would be that council supports the correspondence or resolutions from both those towns, and then that staff be directed to send a letter, just because you want to send the guts of what the resolution is.
Yeah, did you get that, Casey?
Yes. Yep.
Excellent.
Melanie, did you have another point you wanted to
But
make?
are we endorsing additional, just for nationally significant projects? Because if there's 3 pots, the community, regional, do we want to be supporting more money goes into national ones?
I don't know.
Where we really would like to see increased funding for infrastructure, because they put more money into national ones, they might not put so much money into
Right,
local.
if you're sharing with local municipalities, what makes it nationally significant?
But we won't be sharing with-
It's not water treatment plants in general to all the communities. If that's a very nebulous term, nationally significant.
I'm happy to support increased funding from the federal government,
Yeah.
but we have to make sure that,
Not at the expense of.
yeah,
Well, except that.
that's what
But,
I think we need,
How about though if just as a thing to go along with the boys, sort of deal. Do a letter supporting this. If somebody wants to take this further and read the description of what the different pots of money are and how they would relate to us, and that we could then propose a motion or a resolution to be dealt with at the FCM, which they can then support for us.
I'd like us to have more time to look at because the city of Langley and everybody has more, they could possibly benefit from a larger, like transportation, say, right? If they want to go for a monorail or something really big, it would really be could be of national importance, because it really helps that greater region. But
No, I get you.
that could take up a large part of infrastructure.
No, my point
infrastructure
is
spending.
that municipalities band together through the federation, the national federation. Someone comes up with a resolution, you say, hey, we can support you on this, but then when you come up with a resolution, you're hoping they're going to support you on it, right? That's the
I
the
totally
deal.
understand that. I'm just
Rather than us, because we don't even know. Let's be honest. I'm just trying to get this thing off our thing, but rather than kicking this back for more discussion, when we could ask staff to write a letter.
Well, maybe, excuse me,
Yeah.
is the resolution as written satisfactory at this point? Take a look.
Okay. The Bowen Island municipalities support the resolutions from the City of Langley and Township of Langley regarding the Federal Canada Bill Canada Fund, whatever that one is, the Federal Bill Canada Fund, and that staff prepare a letter over the mayor's signature, I think over rather than under, to be sent to the Federation of Canadian Municipalities. And that works for me.
Yeah, all they're asking for.
yeah.
Yeah.
I'll second that.
Yeah. Any further discussion?
He moved it. Oh,
Yeah. All in favor? Okay, those opposed? Okay. Yeah. Passed or not unanimous. Okay, so Emma, reference impact. Is that what we're actually right now? Yeah. This is, whereas there are safety issues in Lower Sled Cove and pedestrians, bus traffic, DNS staff, to hire a traffic engineer specialist to review with the current constraints and to provide recommendations on possible solutions. Wow. Okay. Now this is, do we not have BC Ferries offering engineering services and ICBC?
I think there was something regarding ICBC where there's 240 in your agenda.
That's part of the
You could let Emma make her report.
Okay, Emma.
Well, I haven't actually made a report, but I have verbal comments to this recommendation. It was not a recommendation from staff, it was from the committee. So my comments as staff, ICBC has told us that they do provide some funding for traffic safety reviews. I am still waiting to hear back from them on the exact eligibility criteria. And this does sound a lot like something they would fund, but again, I don't have any conclusive feedback yet. Just as a staff comment on this recommendation, I think we support having a traffic review of this intersection, just because it is the most multimodal intersection on the island, and the current design does create a lot of conflict between these different modes. Beyond that, there's, in terms of funding, there is also the Vancouver Coastal Health Plan H Healthy Communities Fund that we may be eligible for this type of work. And that deadline is actually end of this month. Again, so not guaranteed, but possible. Staff supports this type of work, but in terms of its priority and funding, that's up to council, I think.
I would be a lot more comfortable with referring this recommendation from the impact to staff to explore funding options. Did you wish to speak to that?
Yeah, just two items. One, we've made this one of our strategic priorities.
Okay.
So we have stepped it. The other is, it is anticipated the cost will be approximately 5,000. Funding for this is confident within the overall 50,000 budget for this project. I just wanted to make sure that we're separating this from the Integrated Transportation Master Plan, which I think that's what the $50,000 is referring to.
Are those maybe Kristen's comments?
Those are Kristen's yeah.
Okay. Yeah, when the $50,000 budget was made for the transportation plan, it did not include a traffic engineer consultant to review this intersection.
And that's why I pulled, this is why at the strategic planning, I pulled it out as a separate issue, because our transportation master plan, I think, is a very tight budget. We're hoping to, achieve quite a lot with that. Already a lot of it's been done in-house. So I just wanted to separate the two, and that the fact that we're looking for $5,000 in addition to.
And also,
so I don't want to put pressure on the transportation budget for the transportation plan, because I really feel that's already a tight one. So I'd like to see if we can find whatever funding we need to come up with in addition to, let's fall through with the ICBC lead and VCH Plan H, and then maybe find municipal funding for the rest of it.
Allison?
Well, we're in the budget process and we haven't approved the budget. So I think the motion should more be that council directs staff to include provision for hiring a traffic engineer in the 2016 draft, or 2016 draft budget.
And
so that we will then discuss this as a long, and then we've got this whole pot of money. If it is, I'm not sure if we made it a strategic priority or a step within, but anyhow, the whole funding of strategic priorities is being considered as part of the budget process. So it seems to me, rather than directing staff to go hire a traffic engineer right now, we direct staff to include the hiring of a traffic engineer specialist to review pedestrian traffic within the current constraints. I'm not quite sure what that means. And to provide recommendations on possible solutions in the 2016 budget, draft budget.
What I'm wondering is if we can add to that a request for staff to look at funding options from outside agencies. Because I get the feeling that this might not cost us anything.
ICBC and BC Ferries.
Yeah, well, people really don't want us to go around killing ourselves, and they throw money at things like that all the time. So, yeah, it may be it's a small enough amount. Sorry, I'm going to go to Kathy for a minute.
I just wanted to, at the BIMTAC meeting where this was discussed, one of the reasons it was separated was because this is something that I got the impression that they wanted to deal with sooner rather than later and not wait for the transportation master plan. Yeah. But the same argument could be used for the budget process itself. I just wanted to...
Except one is a year and some of the other.
Yeah, I just wanted to
underscore that. And I think if we have funding options being explored now by staff, if that's possible, if we have the staff resources to do it, then that may bring the issue forward from our budget considerations if we've already got the money to do it. Sorry, I'm carrying on.
Just a few additional comments. I had some preliminary discussions with traffic engineering consultants, and I think a very preliminary estimate right now would be $5,000 to $10,000 for this type of work. The VCH fund only goes up to $5,000. And the ICBC potential funding is undetermined at this point. So just
is which?
Undetermined.
Okay.
Yeah, they haven't given me any exact numbers. Just so we have an idea of what it may potentially cost us. And also, I've gotten crash data from ICBC. I know that this intersection has come up, just for public comment, that anecdotally that there's a lot of issues with near misses, but there has been no claims from ICBC for that intersection over the past 8 years.
I'm sorry, how many years?
Over the past 8 years is what they said.
Past 8 years, no claims.
Yeah. But on the other hand, I do agree that the way it's designed is not inviting, especially to visitors that are not familiar with the area, and especially if we want the objective in our transportation plan to encourage active transportation. Right now we have pedestrians, transit, and car parking, none of them really working very well together. That really goes against our objectives for transportation.
Right. Okay. What was my original recommendation?
That it be referred to staff to to investigate alternative funding mechanisms. Yeah.
Yeah, let's start with that, and then if we're going to bring it forward, it's a relatively small item to bring forward in the budget, and could be part of some code improvements, and I mean, there's lots of places that this amount of money could be allocated. So I don't know that we need to make it a budget item as such at this point for any.
Once we have more information, then
Yeah.
we'll engage whether it needs to be a budget item or not.
Okay.
All right, so what's,
So do you want to just,
what motion do you want me to?
rattle off that motion?
That this item be referred to staff to investigate alternative funding mechanisms or funding sources.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Investigate.
Identify potential funding sources?
Potential funding sources.
Replace the word further with potential.
Okay.
Well, we can just flesh that out. That's the word for this work period.
Melanie?
I just have a question about process. Say you get agreement from VCH and who else? ICBC that they're going to together fund 5,000. And you get an estimate that's going to cost 10,000 overall. And we chips in 5,000. What's the next step? Is it getting an RFP? What do we have to do to hire a transportation consultant?
It needs to come back to council.
That's the,
Yeah.
Okay.
And I think the RFP threshold is
5,000.
For professional fees, it's up to 10,000 for professional fees, but you have to have a justifiable argument to say you've done work with this consultant in the past, that they have a requisite body of knowledge to continue doing the work. Otherwise, it is 5,000 that we normally go out for an RFP.
And you need to add BC Ferries for sort of prolonged stuff.
But because this isn't yet embedded in the budget, we will be coming back to council no matter what. So,
Okay. So have we passed this one yet?
All those in favor?
All those in favor?
You did it second.
I don't even think it was motion
seconded. I'm sorry, I knew that I just assumed you were
Do I have a
seconding.
seconder?
I thought you seconded it, sorry.
Okay. I will certainly second it. Do any further discussion on the motion? Okay. Can I call the question then? All in favor? Okay. Passed unanimously. Okay. Thank you, Emma. And Mr. Andrew. Are we there yet? We're there.
Okay. Yeah, so everybody's had a chance to look at this RFP, the request for proposals, for the Bowen Island Community Center project manager. We did come to council, I guess it was in October, November, with a little bit of a talk about what we were doing, and we were trying to go off on our own there and get some ideas before we went forward with the project manager. Council directed us to go direct and start working on the project manager. So this RFP is, a lot of it's boilerplate, probably 75 to 80% of it is standard, and then there are some obviously very significant Bowen Island bits and pieces to it. I don't know if you've all had a chance to read through it. The management team, and I don't know if we put that in the definitions, but the management team we feel will be mostly BIM oriented. There'll be some representatives from council, the CAO, the manager, all the different managers, recreation, public works, etc. Will be the management team. And the project team will be part of the project managers group. That's how that sort of works down. You have specialists in that area, different areas that he will put together on that side of it. Sorry?
The project manager.
The project manager, yes. What is that?
Next on the
He said he.
Oh, the person. Sorry.
You old guys, you talk like that.
He and she are synonymous for me. I guess most of the information came out of the temporary advisory board final report. That's where those actual numbers came off on the for the multi-use space and different sizes, fitness center stuff. They're not figures; those are figures that are approximations, obviously. And this is going to go back to community consultation again. There'd be no question about that. And but generally speaking, I think I don't know if they talked about lot 2 in here.
Yep.
Yeah, and because that's pretty well defined. And of course that could change too. It depends on what comes back as far as that site inspection is done and the analysis up there. If it's too expensive to do it there, then we'll have to start looking around. But I think it's a lovely site. Any other questions from anybody? I don't know. I can go through it point to point. We had an initial one, and then we Daniel, Christine, and myself. Christine isn't here today, unfortunately. Daniel's upstairs, but we went through it and just sort of picked it apart and tried to sort of customize the bone and stuff like that. And we thought we got it to a reasonable spot, and I'm sure Kathy's had a look at it. See so what we'd like to do, obviously, is get some kind of approval from council that we can move this forward. And Christine is prepared when she gets back from her holidays to sort of send it out.
Okay. Did you?
Yeah, I thought I did read in the RFP, the draft RFP, that it did say only lot 2. And not.
I don't think it said only lot 2. It's probably said lot 2, yeah.
Yeah,
and,
that's where it starts anyway.
Yeah, but it seemed, well, for me, it made it look like it was all about lot 2. And I would just propose in the recommendation here, we've already got this staff workshop scheduled, right? That's the second part of this resolution. My proposal would be that, and because, frankly, I have a lot of concerns about that temporary advisory board and their meetings all being held in private and it's, not being public. And I personally, I don't know, maybe staff can tell me, was there ever a report made to public? Was there? Okay, because I missed that.
This will be a very extended process. It's going to be a 2-year process, probably a year and a half or 2 years, and we're going to.
Anyway, my point was, can we just insert the words after, so that it says that council directs staff to issue the RFP for a project manager for the community center after a staff workshop held to review work to date. Well,
could I just speak to that? One of the, I think the reasons we can issue an RFP. It doesn't mean we have to accept the proposals that come in. All this is doing is, what we envisioned was these 2 processes being done concurrently. Because issuing an RFP is quite a long process, the idea is that we get this RFP issued and in a parallel process, hold the meeting. Council's not bound, as I said, to any of the proposals that come forward. Council can then amend the RFP and reissue the RFP. It does give us a good idea of what sort of project managers are out there without making any sort of commitments. That's why I do like the RFQ process.
Yeah, I think we can amend the RFP right up to the closing date.
You can issue addendums.
Yeah, we will have the, Casey, when is the meeting scheduled?
February 15th.
Okay, so this will just get out while council has, I don't think it'll even be, it'll be published by that stage, but our closing date won't have been made yet.
We're just finally getting a marking. From my perspective, this was in the 2015 strategic plan. This was the very first step. I just really like to have it done before we get into our 2016.
There's nothing set in stone here.
But if we go concurrently, then we can move forward. It's a long time. Just let me go to Maureen first because she's being left out.
Yeah. This is section 3.7, the project completion, and states that the final reports and relevant plans would be delivered to the management team and municipal council by December 2016. I'm concerned about the length of time, and I understand this is a very complex initiative that we're undertaking, but I think putting something out for requests for proposals where we state December 2016 means that people will deliver something that shows work being completed up to 2016. If the documentation comes from the successful applicant in December 2016, we're only going to be sitting for half the month, it's going to go into January, we're not going to have the final report and plans to actually chew them over before we get to our strategic planning for 2017. So if it's at all possible, I really would like to see that December 2016 move forward a couple of months so that we can, first of all, see whether there's somebody out there who's prepared to respond to the RFQ and commit to finishing the work by September or October. And that just puts us in a much better position to be able to think about it and plan for it.
Works for me unless that's an unrealistic timeline.
Well, that's not
I'll
right.
go through the balance first.
I think all through here, there's reports to be made, and there's different phases, so I don't think it's going to be that we're not going to hear anything until we get to the end. But by the time this thing goes out, at the end of it's March 4th, they're asking for responses back, another month to analyze, so that takes you. Yeah, you've got an estimated award within 6 weeks, which I thought was a little long. You're into the middle of into the end of April, middle of April, by the time the thing gets awarded. And May, June, July, August, September, October, November, 6 to 7 months. So I would suggest maybe we change the word by to before.
I think we should set a date of maybe September, because if it comes that the project manager can't complete it in that time, we'll report back to council. But if we set December, they're going to work to that date. And I hear what Councilor Nicholson is saying.
I agree with that, and I think there's a little bit of flexibility in there. I think in the contract, when these guys come back, they're going to say, hey, December's really unrealistic. And that's what we're going for, or let's put it in November.
Let's push them. I'd say September. Just push them a bit. They'll, like you said, they'll come back to us and tell us if that's.
They will. They'll say it's unrealistic and we can't possibly do it within that time
But
frame.
maybe we could see if that is in fact what they come back with. Maybe they'll, they may, you give somebody the time, they'll take the time.
Exactly.
Yeah, let's do it.
Okay.
Yeah, here. The sooner the better. And, all we can do is throw it out there and see what comes back. And,
So I'm prepared to move the first half of the motion, because we've already scheduled the staff workshop, so do you really need a motion there to be held?
It's actually a council workshop that's been scheduled.
Yeah.
I don't know what that is.
Well, that is workshops are guided by staff.
Okay, well, I'm just going to move the first part because it takes me longer to done it. And I'm going to make a very small change to the word because I've got a few typos.
Well, there is typos.
Yeah. So by changing the to a, I think the understanding is it's going to be in the format it's in, but we'll be able to fix the typos.
Issue a request for proposals.
Yeah, so I would move that council direct staff to issue a request for proposal for a project manager for the community center project.
As amended,
Because
we will be changing the date, 3.7. And my bugaboo, Casey, can we please take up the bracket RFP? You don't want to do that if it references anything further on.
Yeah.
If we say a request for proposal, I'm not sure why you're mentioning that.
Just so we can fix the typos.
But she's saying it, but it says as amended.
Okay, well then leave it as that.
Okay.
Yeah, I'd be more comfortable.
Okay.
And I would also ask for a council resolution that that project completion date be changed from December 2016 to September, mid-September.
Okay, let's put my little motion on the table and do that one first.
Okay, so the council directs staff to issue the request
No,
for
the
proposal.
first motion's got to be that council direct staff to amend the proposal to change clause 3.7, is it 3.7?
Yes.
Project completion
Yes, right.
to by the September 2016?
I would say mid-September.
By mid-September 2016.
And then
September 15th is what you.
Well, it's council meeting.
So that's up. That's moved. Do I have a seconder? Any discussion on the motion? All in favor? Okay, carried unanimously. Second motion then.
I would move that council direct staff to issue the request for proposal for a project manager for community center project as amended. Oh, the request for proposal as amended for a project manager for the community center project.
Okay. Seconder?
I'll second that.
Casey, just clarification, it's the request for proposal,
Yeah.
not a request for proposal.
Oh, I think changed
from
I put it back. I put it back.
Because
Okay.
it's now as amended.
Gotcha.
Okay. Any discussion on the question? All in favor? Carried unanimously.
Nope. Oh, sorry.
Yep.
Sorry.
Thank you for checking.
Okay, thank you. That takes care of that one. Now we have Councillor Nicholson. Verbal report, Metro Vancouver. Anything to report?
We haven't met.
Okay.
We'll meet for the first time on Friday.
Thank you. Excellent report. Next, we have Trustees Fast and Morris on Islands Trust.
I think the issue, the key one is the on-table item that I asked to be put on table. Unfortunately, it didn't get released to the public until the 22nd, so it couldn't go on the agenda. This is the news release on the budget proposal for the year starting April 1st, 2016, going through to March 31st, 2017. There's an increase of some close to $20,000 to the loan requisition over last year. So they'll be asking for $234,000 from us. There's a survey proposed this year. Comments need to be in by February 17th, so that's why I added this on table, because it's a bit time sensitive. I'd like to work with the communications group to get this news release sent out to the Vaughan email list. Part of the major reason for part of the increase is our assessed values went up more than most of the other islands did. We had the 5-something increase that Kristen talked about today, and the other islands maybe went up 1 and a bit. Some of them didn't go up much at all. So our proportionate share of the overall assessed value of the trust assessed value went from 15.7% last year to 16.2% this year. There's some other cost increases, and I can't find the previous year's formula calculation to do the number crunching, but I will have a better written report for that and be able to answer that question in the next day or two.
And I've got to say.
Yes.
A couple of other things that the Islands Trust has been busy with since we haven't met since December as a council, but I thought council might be interested in knowing that the Islands Trust executive also wrote to Minister McKenna about evaluation of marine shipping during environmental assessments and suggestions for improving public participation. And they specifically mentioned Woodfibre LNG, and it's a good 7-page document. If anybody wants it, it's at the Islands Trust website. And then secondly, the senior plan for the Islands Trust also is alerting trust communities that the policy around antenna siting for radio communications and is changing. And Canada will be expecting local trust committees and municipalities to develop their own consultation policy or use a policy provided by Canada, but just to let people know that a little bit of change is happening. Because we had a proposal to put a radio tower down over here, right? That kind of thing. So the legislation is changing. That's all I'm trying to say.
And it means that municipalities, I'm sorry,
well, I will find more information.
There's been a letter, has there not, to BIM from the Islands Trust, because the feds were wanting to cancel the protocol agreement. And I thought there was a draft letter that was coming out advising that and telling us what the issues are. So
I'll read
find
it
out.
if you want. But
No, we got to move on here. We're running way behind.
So will we be responsible for public consultation?
Yeah. Okay.
Thank you.
Okay, we've got a few things that were pulled out of the consent agenda. Emergency planning, who wanted that one?
I did. I just really wanted to draw attention to the report that's included in our agenda package. It's really quite thorough and very useful and timely, given the work that we're doing. And the one point that I wanted to make is that the discussion of what actually happens during evacuation procedures and what role the police have or potentially have during evacuation is something that I'm not sure was on the radar when the task force was constituted. So I'm wondering if Corporal Arriego might be either involved in the task force or invited to attend the meetings of the Emergency Management Plan Review Task Force, because the issues that are being brought up there are really significant. And it's a great report. One more thing. Naomi Yamamoto, who is the provincial minister in charge of emergency preparedness, attended a meeting I was at last week, and the topic came up. It was a meeting of local governments and also Vancouver Coastal Health. So this topic came up very briefly, and the one question she was asked was, what kind of funding will be available for municipalities to help in the development of their emergency plans? And she didn't answer the question. So that's something we may want to follow up on.
With our MLA possibly.
With our MLA.
Yeah, we should meet with that man.
So,
that's all.
Okay.
Sorry, can we move the recommendation then, because we pulled it from the consent agenda?
Alright.
And this came up as a topic at my UDCM meetings, which is why I asked it to be put on, because it's time sensitive for the comments. So I'll move the recommendation at 2.3 that correspondence from Minister State Naomi Yamamoto seeking input from local governments on the Emergency Program Act. We refer to the Emergency Plan Review Task Force for reviews, and the Emergency Plan Review Task Force provide. I'd like to make a little change. Input to council on recommendations on comments to submit.
By February 19th. There's a lot. That's the only thing I have to say on that one.
But that doesn't, I think we need to change the resolution because council needs to report back to the province by February 19th. So we need the input from the task force.
Well, yeah, but I thought the February 19th date was referring to when we had to report.
That's what I mean.
Yeah, so we wanted it earlier than.
In advance, because you're asking the.
Input to council on comments to submit.
In advance of the deadline.
Okay. So change at the end and say in advance of the February 19th. It's going to be extremely
First meeting.
That's right. To council. That will be reported to the Senate citizen.
I mean, it could just be as simple as you know, submitting this, you know, answering the survey. There's an online survey as well as the written comments.
Okay.
That is extremely tight because we only have one council meeting in advance.
And we raised the issue at UBCM that is an extremely tight deadline, and I think we're going to be asking for it to achieve, and that's something we can raise with our MLAs.
Great.
Okay.
Okay. Okay. All in favor? Here it is. There. Okay. That is that item. Now we have busking has been brought back.
Yeah, I just want the word north to be added. South is added, but not north.
North is hereby added, so now you have to research it right.
Okay. Sorry, which number is this? 2.4. Thank you. That council endorsed the Bow-Lander Arts Council's busking program as a cultural experience for visitors to the Snug Cove area and Arts Square, and that staff be directed to issue a permit to busk to the Bowen Island Arts Council for busking on Snug Cove Wharf North. Snug Cove Wharf South and Snug Cove Wharf North. Try to say that 3 times fast. Okay. Provided that the permittee addresses all, so that added the word north. Provided that the permittee addresses all stipulations outlined with the D in the permit to busk, and that staff be directed to issue a permit bus to the Bowen Island Arts Council for specifically privately owned locations named in the Bowen Island Arts Council permit guidelines, provided that the permit addresses all stipulations outlined in the bus, and that staff be directed to waive the permit fee and deposit at Bowen Island Municipality's name as additionally insured in the Bowen Island Arts Council's liability insurance policy.
Okay, do we have a seconder? Do you have any discussion on the motion?
Just a very brief addition. I've been speaking with Metro Vancouver and Bowen Heritage, and probably the Orchard area will be added as a site for busking. We're quite interested. But it doesn't have to affect any of this because it's Metro jurisdiction.
Okay. And call the question on favor? It's passed unanimously. Thank you. So now the park plan revised contract cost. What do we have to say about that?
I pulled that one, and I pulled it because I really don't quite understand why, and the reason being given is there's all sorts of strategic plan items that need staff time, and so I don't think it's absolutely imperative that this has to be approved today. I don't understand that. And I would rather deal with this as part of the budget process and part of the review of the strategic plan, because maybe a better way to deal with it is to not proceed with some of the other strategic plan items so that there's staff time available to deal with this one. So I'm not supporting the motion to be passed. I think it should be referred to the budget and strategic plan implementation process.
Okay, so is there any requirement that this be passed quickly?
I think there's momentum going on the Parks Master Plan, and this will delay timing significantly. The reason that we're requesting an additional $15,000 is Bonnie's time is stretched, but I would not, maybe too much emphasis was put on strategic priorities. The difference between, and reading Bill Granger's letter, the difference between the Integrated Transportation Master Plan and the Parks Master Plan is the allocation of staff resources. Emma is dedicated probably about 75% of the time to the Transportation Master Plan, whereas Bonnie's time is stretched over both bylaw services, parks, and a number of other responsibilities. And if we want a really quality master plan, I think the philosophy that I've heard from this council, and certainly from staff, is if we don't have the internal time or resources and you want to get something accomplished, contract it out.
So that's the logic.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
I still don't, what services will the additional services contract be being asked to do?
I can answer that. Primarily, I'm in discussion with Lees and Associates, and primarily it's really ensuring that the public consultation is exhaustive and thorough. And where I thought I might be able to help out a little bit more in that process, I'm going to help out as much as I can, but I don't think that, I will be hands-on all the time for all consultations, saying that I'll have a lot of input into where they take place, what is taking place. The other is, I thought, the creation of the draft. So the draft is sort of the template upon which then community input, more staff, making it Bowen will come after the draft. And that creation of that draft document, again, initially I thought I would have a bit more time available to get to that place in the process. And realistically, I'm just trying to be completely realistic, that's not the case.
Okay, I'm more comfortable now that we have a discussion, so I'll move the recommendation. The council approve an additional $15,000 plus GST expenditure funded from the Community Parks Reserve to update the Bowen Island Park. Master Park Plan or Park Plan?
Park Plan. We're calling it for the time being.
Yes.
And I'll second it.
Seconded, all in favor? Thank you. Passed unanimously. Okay.
And I pulled the next one, not because I'm not unhappy. I'm quite happy with the public engagement problem. There's some problems with some of the wording in the list of people that are going to be contacted. So I'm quite happy to move the recommendation on the understanding that there might be some small wording changes under the list of stakeholders.
Certainly.
All right, I'll move that council approve the public engagement plan, PEP, for the Integrated Transportation Master Plan, IT. And we don't need Do we have an idea? No. For the integrated transportation master plan.
Can I have a seconder on that? And is there any discussion?
The resolution says the cubic engagement plan.
Yes, don't change that.
My glass is big clean.
Okay. All in favor? Okay. And with that, we've got 2.13A. What the heck is that?
I was just with the fire hall, and I just really, this was recommendations that council direct staff to allocate staff resources to assist with public consultation and education for the new fire hall. And so when I read through the minutes, for me, this is a really important part of the process here, because this will go to referendum, so we really need to get community backing, and we need to get the good education out there. And so I was just wondering if we could also get some involvement from the communication working group, because I think it's a good opportunity to get children involved in this. I mean, they love fire trucks, and we could get some real positive wording out there, and I think that would just help us.
So you have no objection to the resolution per se?
No, just nowhere within the.
You just want to add communications team.
Yes, it doesn't even have to go into the resolution or the recommendation, because I know the report or the minutes say that the planner will be involved, with Emma, so I know she's part of the communication.
Yeah.
I just wanted I would like just to bring this awareness to, I would like the communication working group to either review it or input, whatever, just.
Well, I think that's part of why we want the staff involvement, is to help us design the plan. And so, and Kathy's also a part of the committee and a member of the plan, so no intention to leave them out.
But it's also implicit in our communicating for public policy that it will get referred to. But it's good to underscore that, because
So then I have to make that motion. Where is it?
That council directs staff to allocate staff resources to assist with public consultation / education for the new fire hall. Would you like to second it?
Yes, I will.
All in favor? Passed unanimously. Thank you. We are adjourned.
Bingo.
Now, is lunch upstairs or being brought down here?
Yes.
We're going to bring lunch down here, I think.
Yes. Mr.
Already just grabbing up there.
Oh, boy.